Some days feel completely normal. You make coffee, check your phone, and wave to the neighbor. It rains. You shut the window. Night falls. You draw the curtains and lie down, just like every day. But what if someone is watching you every time you do those normal things? What if the neighbor you greet each morning has been watching you for months? What if that rainy night, the footsteps outside weren't from anyone you know? What if your relaxing weekend getaway was a setup for a hunt? What if the stranger at the bar didn't drink, but silently memorized all your habits? What if the driver behind you wasn't trying to pass, but waiting for you to pull over in the middle of nowhere? What if you think you live alone, but the footprints on your floor tell a different story? And what if that sweet message from a stranger is the start of a nightmare you can't just unmatch? Today, you'll hear 21 terrifying true stories that happened to people just like you, going to work, going on a trip, going to class, and never being the same again. And the story that'll chill you the most is saved for last. Welcome to a place where we don't tell ghost stories. We tell stories about normal things that slipped past the safety line. I've never been a superstitious person, but there are moments in life that reason cannot explain. And if you've ever lived in a strange place, surrounded by nameless cold faces, you'll know just how terrifying that feeling can be. My name is Lisa, a third-year architecture student who just moved into an old apartment complex nestled deep in the suburbs, far from campus. I had no other choice. The dorms were full, and this place, though a bit gloomy, was cheap and still had vacancies. I figured I had to endure 1 year, and it would be over. 3 small rows of buildings lined up like worn-out boxes. Each unit had a white-painted wooden window with peeling paint, and the creaking sound of doors echoed whenever the wind blew through. The residents here were mostly students like me, a few teaching assistants, and some people I couldn't put a name to. But the one who caught my attention from the very first day was a woman. She lived in the opposite block, always wore a light gray sweater, and walked with a limp like someone who'd been injured. Her hair was a tangled mess, and her eyes blank, lifeless, chilling. She never spoke. No one greeted her, and strangely, everyone seemed to avoid mentioning her. Once, when I asked about her in the shared kitchen, my housemate simply glanced at me and said, "Just ignore it. Everyone here knows her, but no one dares to get involved." That response, seemingly casual, planted an uneasy seed in me, as if I had unknowingly stepped into a place I didn't belong. I'm not the kind of person who gets hung up on vague things, but ever since that first encounter, I began to feel like someone was watching me. At first, it was just occasional glances. When I cooked in the shared kitchen, she was there, standing silently in the corner, not touching anything. No one talked to her. She said nothing. What was even stranger was her gaze. She didn't scan the room or look at anyone. She just stared at me. It felt like I was being studied, every breath scrutinized. I tried to ignore it, but deep down, my instincts were screaming. Something about this place was very wrong. A few days later, around 11 p.m., I was studying when I happened to glance out my bedroom window. The dim yellow streetlight lit up the small street below, and there she was, standing there, in the middle of the road, alone, not moving, not speaking, just staring up at my window. At first I thought it was a coincidence, but the longer I looked, the more certain I became. She was looking at me. Not the building, not in general, at me. I did something I now wish I hadn't. I raised my hand and waved. Silent pause. She didn't wave back. She jumped in place twice, like a child overjoyed, then bolted into the opposite building. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying the image of her under that street lamp, that strange leaping motion like a lunatic, a creature that had just spotted its prey. The next morning, I told a housemate. She just shrugged and said, "She's always around. Best not to pay attention, like the rest of us." I tried to shake it off and return to my student routine, but the strange events kept happening more frequently. One night, I opened my door to get some water, and she was standing right outside. No knocking, no speaking, just standing there, silent. I stepped back in shock. My heart nearly stopped. But she turned around and walked away like I was the one who had violated her space. A few days later, I lost my keys. A small incident, but to me, it was the last straw. I couldn't sleep knowing that door could be opened at any time. That night, I woke up at 2 a.m., not knowing why, but in the darkness I heard a sound, software rhythmic, like someone touching wood. I held my breath. The sound came from the closet. Sound effect, racing heartbeat, slow clicking noises. I took slow, careful steps toward the closet. My hand was trembling on the handle, and when I opened it, I screamed. A primal, hoarse, bone-chilling scream. She was there, in my closet, eyes wide, holding a fruit knife, and around her neck was my burgundy-colored tie. I tried to back away, but before I could react, she lunged. The blade flashed. Her breath was hot. The stench of oily hair and aging flesh made me gag. We struggled. I screamed. I kicked. I scratched. But she was unimaginably strong. Every second felt like a lifetime burned in terror. Finally, the door burst open. My friend, Ivy, stormed in and helped pin her down. We held her until the police arrived. She didn't resist, didn't say a word, just looked at me with pity, as if I were the one who should be locked up. Police found my room key in her coat pocket and a notebook filled with my name written from the first page to the last. Turns out, she was the sister of the building manager, a severely mentally ill woman secretly placed in a vacant unit no one knew about. I was lucky to survive, but since that night, I've never slept soundly again, even after moving out, even though that room is just a memory now. I still see those eyes, the eyes from the closet I never leave open anymore, not even a crack. I had been living with my husband Benjamin in this modest 2-story house for over 20 years. We weren't young anymore, but we had never grown tired of the peaceful life here. Mornings spent reading on the porch, late afternoons watering the garden, and quiet evenings watching the soft yellow glow of the streetlights. That was all I ever needed. But then Nathan moved in. The house across the street had been vacant for nearly a year. I couldn't even remember the last time someone mowed the lawn or opened the windows over there. So when I saw a shiny BMW pull into the driveway and a young man with a bright smile step out, I was surprised, but also a little pleased. Nathan was around 25, tall, polite, and had the air of someone who had tasted early success. He introduced himself openly, saying he worked in media and entertainment, supporting influencers and creating content. He quickly bonded with Benjamin, and their conversations about investments, sports, and college days kept them laughing all afternoon. I thought having a neighbor like that was a blessing. A few weeks later, I started noticing a young woman frequently visiting Nathan's house. Lightly curled blonde hair, slender figure, always dressed in provocative dresses, and driving a white convertible. Her name was Eva. I'd heard Nathan mention it once in passing. At first, I thought she was his girlfriend, young, striking, and seemingly a good match for Nathan. But what struck me as odd was that she often came over when Nathan wasn't home. She had her key, walked in like she owned the place, stayed for a few hours, then left like nothing ever happened. I wasn't sure how many times I had seen it. 4? 6? More than 10? I had considered asking Nathan about it, but decided not to. I was afraid of seeming nosy. Benjamin also told me not to concern myself with other people's affairs. Then one time, I witnessed them fighting. A summer afternoon, while I was watering the front yard, loud shouting erupted from across the street. Eva was standing at Nathan's door, her face twisted in rage. She pointed at Nathan's face, saying things no one should say in public. I couldn't make out every word, but her tone was threatening. Nathan stood still, trying to stay calm. Eventually, Eva got into her car and sped off, tires screeching, leaving behind a trail of smoke and the stench of burnt rubber. I hoped it would end there, but no. Just a few days later, I saw the white convertible parked outside Nathan's house again, once more, when he wasn't home. Something was wrong. One morning, I saw Nathan sitting alone on his porch, deep bags under his eyes, his face drawn and weary. He looked at me, forced a smile, and quietly said, "Have you ever felt like someone was watching your every breath?" I was about to ask more, but Benjamin stepped out just then, and the conversation shifted. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something felt off, a vague but unsettling feeling. Around 2 a.m., a sharp siren tore through the silence. I bolted upright, pulled the curtain aside. Police cars, an ambulance, red lights flashing wildly across the street. Benjamin and I rushed outside. Nathan was being wheeled out on a stretcher. His shirt was soaked in blood, and Eva, her hands cuffed, was being led out. She said nothing. Her face was icy cold, but her eyes were wild, as if she were still in some kind of trance. A week later, Nathan returned. His right arm was in a cast, and he limped. He invited us over, sat us at the dining table, and told us everything. Eva had been stalking him for a long time, not just through her visits, but through hidden cameras. "I don't know when it started," Nathan said, not looking up. "But she knew everything. She listened to my calls. She knew what I ate, what time I slept. She planted devices in my bedroom, even in the bathroom." Eva had once stolen his spare key and made a copy. Every time Nathan left, she would return to check the cameras, replace the batteries, and wipe away traces. She even washed the bed sheets, as if she still lived there. Nathan realized what was happening when he found a small camera under his bed. At first, he thought he was dreaming, but then he found a second one, then a third, inside a fake electrical socket, and a fourth, hidden inside a teddy bear on his shelf. On the night of the incident, Nathan was half asleep, half awake. He heard whispering very close to his ear. "I've already forgiven you. Why would you do this?" When he opened his eyes, Eva was sitting at the edge of the bed, holding a knife, her face pale like wax, hair hanging limp, and her eyes completely empty. "If I can't have you, no one can." That was the last thing Eva said before she struck. The first stab missed his shoulder. Nathan jolted awake. They struggled. He was wounded in the arm and abdomen, but in the chaos, Nathan kicked Eva in the leg, causing her to lose balance. He crawled to his phone, blood smeared across the floor, and dialed 911. Police arrived within 4 minutes, but to Nathan, it felt like a lifetime. Eva was arrested on the spot. As she was cuffed, she kept repeating one sentence like she was hypnotized: "You'll always be mine." The police investigation later uncovered a total of 9 cameras inside the house. One of them had recorded Eva talking to Nathan's pillow for nearly 40 minutes, as if it were him. Nathan moved out not long after. Before he left, he told me, "I'll never trust a sweet smile again, and neither will I. Because sometimes, loving too much isn't romantic. It's a nightmare that hasn't yet been named. I moved to this neighborhood because I wanted a fresh start. The old city was filled with broken memories, youthful mistakes, and a breakup that left me lost. This place was quiet, clean, and seemed safe, exactly what I needed. My neighbors were mostly families with young children. They were friendly but busy. I was a bit anxious about fitting in, being the only single person on the block. But everything changed when I met David, the man living in the large house right next to mine. David was a strange man, tall, quiet, always fully covered from head to toe. No matter how hot it was, he wore long-sleeve jackets, thick slacks, high collars, and thin gloves. I had never seen his hands or neck. There was always something hidden. Still, when I approached him to introduce myself, David smiled and shook my hand. That smile, it wasn't warm, but it wasn't exactly cold either. He said, "Finally, someone from our generation moved in. This block is crowded, but I've always felt alone here." At the time, I sympathized. I didn't know that his loneliness came from something else. Over time, I began to notice. No one ever went in or out of David's house. No deliveries, no relatives, no friends. I work from home, and my office window faces his front porch. David's car was always parked there, but I never once saw him leave the house. The lights in his home were rarely on, and at night, I always had the feeling of being watched, even though my curtains were fully drawn. I started paying more attention. Sometimes, I saw a figure passing by the second-floor window in his house. But when I looked again, there was nothing. Another time, I went outside around midnight because I couldn't sleep, and I saw David standing motionless behind his curtain, not moving, not blinking, just standing there. Then everything came to a head on a Wednesday night. I was woken up by loud music, almost 2 a.m. I pulled the curtain aside. 7 cars were parked in front of David's house. Lights blazing, laughter, clinking glasses, chatter, like a massive party. I was shocked. David had never invited anyone over. I threw on a coat and walked over to remind him of the noise. I knocked, no one answered. I tried the door. It opened. Inside, empty. The living room was spotless. No misplaced furniture, no wine glasses, no food. But the sounds were still there. Laughter, music, voices shouting. The sounds came from a Bluetooth speaker playing a recording. A perfect recording of a party. Fake. I felt a chill down my spine. Then I smelled something. A scent I knew but never wanted to smell again. Bleach and burning metal. I followed the smell to the basement door. It was slightly ajar. Light flickered inside. I took a deep breath and stepped down. Each footstep felt twice as heavy. The air was thick, damp, and cold. I heard machinery, grinding, sawing, metal clanging. I crouched and peeked through the basement door. 3 men in full protective suits, goggles, and gloves stood around a large metal table. Something was lying on it under a sheet. On the floor, a dark red liquid spread like ink. A sharp, metallic smell filled the air. Blood. I wanted to scream, but my throat locked up. I turned to leave. The basement light snapped off. I felt a hand touch my shoulder, cold, hard as stone. I didn't dare look back. I just ran, bolted up the stairs, out of the house, over the fence, and into mine. From my 3rd-floor office, I looked across. About 5 minutes later, 8 people, including David, rushed out of the house, all in protective suits. They looked around as if searching for someone. I held my breath, turned off all the lights. One of them looked straight at me, even though I was behind fully drawn curtains. Then they vanished into the night. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. The cars were gone. The lights were off, but the packages were still piled at the door. I asked my neighbors, "Did you see the party at David's house last night?" Everyone shook their heads. They even said, "That house has been empty for at least 2 weeks." I nearly lost it. I checked the security camera I'd installed in my yard. I rewound to that night. But nothing. No cars, no David, no one leaving the house. Just me, walking into his house. I shut the laptop, sat in the dark, gasping for breath. Now, every night I feel like someone is watching me from that empty house next door. I don't dare open the curtains. I don't dare turn on the lights. Because I know David is still there, and maybe he never left. I used to think scary neighbors were the nosy ones, the loud ones. But some people, like David, don't say much, don't make noise. They just stand there, watching, remembering, waiting for the right moment to act. If you ever meet a neighbor who's always fully covered, never leaves the house, never has visitors, don't greet them, don't talk to them, and under no circumstances should you enter their home. I couldn't sleep for many nights afterward. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that basement, the dim light, the smell of bleach, the sound of machines, and that cold hand on my shoulder. I didn't dare tell anyone, afraid they'd think I was delusional. But I know I saw something that doesn't belong in this world. A week later, I decided to install a small camera behind the third-floor curtain facing David's house. Not for anything else, just to prove I wasn't insane. I let it run every night, reviewing the footage each morning. Nothing on the first 3 nights. But on the 4th night, at 3 a.m., I saw a figure standing in the middle of David's yard, silent, still, for nearly 30 minutes. Tall, slender frame, broad shoulders, wearing a long coat. I zoomed in. It was David. But what chilled me was, he was staring straight at the camera, right at the lens, as if he knew I was watching. I checked the camera. No internet, no signal transmission. How did he know? I immediately took it down, but I couldn't sleep that night. Around 4 a.m., I heard a very soft knock. 3 taps. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. No one had any reason to come to my house at that hour. I looked through the peephole. No one. But the feeling that someone was standing there didn't go away. I didn't open the door, but from a distance I heard footsteps, slow, fading down the sidewalk. The next morning, I stepped onto my porch. On the step was a pair of black leather gloves, neatly placed, just like the ones David used to wear. I called the police. They came to check. But when I told them about the basement, the fake party, and the shadow in the night, they just looked at me like I needed to see a psychiatrist. I started losing sleep. Every sound startled me. My windows were always shut, curtains always down. I no longer dared go outside after 8 p.m. One evening, curled up on the couch, I heard a whisper coming from the air conditioner. A whisper, soft and deep. "You came into my house." I turned it off. But that sentence kept repeating in my head, over and over, until I nearly went mad. I decided to move. I couldn't live next to that house anymore. Before leaving, I looked back at it one last time. The packages were still there. The grass was overgrown. And someone was standing behind the second-floor curtain, not moving, not blinking, just watching me. I don't know who or what David is. I don't know what's happening in that basement. But I know one thing for certain. Some things, once seen, will follow you for life. And neighbors aren't always what they seem. If you move into a quiet place and your neighbor is always covered from head to toe, don't try to befriend them, and never, ever step inside their house. The late October rain came without warning, as if the sky had finally decided to unleash all the sorrow it had held back all season. Wind howled through every crack in the house, each gust like someone trying to slip inside. In a small wooden house on the outskirts of Barrow Creek, a place where the locals believed the ghosts had moved out along with the cheap housing, 8-year-old Ben was home alone. For the first time, no dad, no mom, only the dim ceiling light, a threadbare fabric sofa, and the relentless ticking of the wall clock like a warning whispered with every second. His parents were stuck at a charity event nearly 3 hours away by car, the only bridge back into town having collapsed due to the heavy rain. His mother called at the last minute. "Ben, remember what I said. Lock the doors, draw the curtains, leave the lights on, and never open the door for anyone, even if the voice sounds familiar." Ben nodded, not out of full understanding, but because he was excited. Tonight, he could eat candy without being reminded, watch movies past his bedtime, and play video games late into the night. It was the kind of freedom he had always dreamed of, the one adults called responsibility. He didn't know that some dreams are only sweet at the beginning. After hours of staring at the screen, his hand slackened and the game controller slipped to the floor. He dozed off on the sofa, a half-eaten lollipop still in his mouth. But what woke him wasn't a dream. It was the cold, bone-deep cold. He opened his eyes. The TV was off. The house was silent, save for the rain tapping against the windows. But what terrified Ben wasn't the sound, it was the lack of it. All the usual noises, the hum of the fridge, the wind slipping through cracks, had vanished. He sat up. Outside, the wind howled again in uneven bursts. The house felt like a hollow box, and Ben was in the middle of it, unsure who was holding the lid. He walked to the window, pressed his hand against the glass. It was ice cold. The faint glow of the streetlight spilled onto the yard, casting shadows long like ropes. He saw a dark shape slip past the fence, maybe a tree, or a cat, or he repeated his mother's words like a charm. Just a tree, the wind's moving it, that's all. He decided to head upstairs. The second floor was darker than usual. No nightlight, no glow from the window, just rain thick as a curtain of wet fog. He entered his room, turned on the light, drew the curtains, tried to force himself to sleep. Then the first lightning bolt flashed, blinding, illuminating the entire room for a heartbeat. And in that heartbeat, Ben saw his shadow on the wall. And another one, smaller, standing behind him, unmoving. Darkness returned. A single heartbeat. Ben was jolted upright and turned on every light in the room. Nothing there. But he couldn't convince himself it was just a trick of the light. He dozed for a few minutes before he heard something. A creak from the wooden floorboards, not constant, slow, uneven, but clearly not random, like someone moving very, very carefully. He held his breath. Then came a sound, like a cat, but not a normal cat. Meow. Iya. A cat is being strangled, or someone imitating a cat. Ben stepped out of bed, not out of curiosity, but because the fear was too strong to stay still. Then he saw the wardrobe, closed earlier, now slightly ajar. Drops of water slid down Ben's forehead. He wasn't wet. It was cold sweat. Then, drip. A droplet of blood fell from the gap in the wardrobe onto the wooden floor. Ben didn't scream, didn't cry. He simply turned around and walked briskly to the door. His heart was pounding like war drums, ears ringing. His feet were no longer aware of the floor beneath them. He shut the door behind him, and the cat-like screech echoed from inside the wardrobe. But this time it was clearer, more distorted, like a person screaming with a torn throat. He bolted downstairs, didn't turn on any lights, crawled beneath the dining table, a narrow, hidden space. He tried not to breathe too loudly, hugging his knees tightly. Footsteps echoed from the stairs, chaotic, uneven, like someone who was either limping or not used to their body. Someone entered. Ben peeked through the gap between the table legs. Bare feet, skin pale as flour, shirt torn, stained with dried blood, and in his hand, a wrench. The figure stood still in the center of the room, silent, motionless, didn't speak. Ben clamped a hand over his mouth. The air was thick, like tar. The figure didn't bend down, but he lifted his head and looked straight at the table, not like he was searching, like he already knew. Ben saw his eyes, eyes with no soul, eyes that seemed controlled by something inside the wardrobe. The figure turned away, didn't say a word, walked to the door. The hinge creaked, then slammed shut. Ben stayed under the table for a long time. He didn't know how long. By the time he crawled out, dawn had broken. The next morning, Ben tidied up everything. He told no one, just hid the wrench, the one the figure left behind, in the drawer under his bookshelf. He didn't know why he didn't throw it away. Maybe fear, or maybe to remind himself it was real. Weeks later, he was no longer afraid, but he never slept without a nightlight again. He didn't tell that story for many years, not until he was old enough to understand. Some things don't need a reason to appear. Some houses aren't entirely yours, and some rains last longer than the night. In the suburbs of Vallejo, in a neighborhood so quiet, even the dogs barked softly, lived a boy named Liam, 11 years old, small for his age, with few friends, and dreams no one had taught him to have. He was the kind of child who disliked crowds, preferred staring out the window to scrolling on a phone, and often heard sounds adults dismissed as just your imagination. But Liam knew, imaginations don't leave footprints on wet wooden floors. That night, it rained. Not a poetic kind of rain, but the kind that felt like the sky was trying to scrub the earth clean. Rain hammered the roof, a sound echoing in his chest like a looping song. The wind screamed through the cracks in the door, carrying howls Liam couldn't quite decide were wind or something else. He tossed and turned, couldn't sleep. And then, almost by instinct, he put on his raincoat and stepped outside, into the park, alone, in the rain. Valley Crest Park during the day was full of joggers, kids playing and dogs on leashes, but on a rainy night, it became a forgotten space. As Liam approached the park's gate, he noticed two trucks parked across the street, one white, one gray. The lights were off, the windows fogged up, and no one was inside. But they didn't feel abandoned. He continued on, crossing the soggy lawn. Each step felt like he was stepping on someone's heart, wet, soft, sinking. After about 20 minutes, Liam felt tired. The rain hadn't stopped. Turning back, he cut across a side path near the park, and that's when he saw it. At first, he thought it was a garbage bag, a lump in the middle of the road. But as he got closer, Liam realized it wasn't trash. It was a man, lying face down, arms bent unnaturally, black pants, long-sleeved shirt, not clothes made for walking in the rain. There was a dark stain across the back of the shirt, unclear whether it was water or something else. No one lies in the middle of the street, in the rain, at midnight, unless they're not quite a person anymore. Liam was moving closer when a sound echoed from the direction of the park. Coo. A cat? But not quite. No real cat made that noise. It sounded like someone pretending to be a cat, warped, tense like a snapped string, like a scream being choked midair. Liam turned to look. Only fog and trees. He turned back toward the man. The man was sitting up, his head tilted awkwardly to one side, like he wasn't familiar with his own neck. His face was pale, hair soaked and clinging to his skin. And his smile, a wide, unnatural grin, crooked, stretched beyond the corners of his mouth like it had been painted on. He stared straight at Liam, and in his hand was a kitchen knife. Without thinking, Liam turned and ran. His small feet pounded the slippery grass like it was ice. Behind him, footsteps gave chase, staggered, uneven, but relentless. "I'm going to kill you." The voice rang out, "Doctor," emotionless, like someone reciting a line they didn't understand. Liam didn't dare run home. He knew that if he did, the man would know where he lived. And sometimes, knowing is enough. Instead, he veered into the woods, toward the howling sound from before, where the park lights couldn't reach. The wind howled like mourning. Trees bent as if trying to stop him. Rain fell from every direction, crushing the air. Liam slipped. His hand skidded across a rock. Blood diluted into rain, red like a warning. He pulled himself up, hid behind an old tree. His heart pounded like it would explode. His ears rang, and he knew if the footsteps came one step closer, he would scream. But there were no footsteps. No more scraping of a blade against bark. Nothing. And it was that nothingness that nearly drove Liam mad. He sat there, in the dark, in the rain, in his own blood. In a forest, no one entered after 9 p.m. He didn't know how long it had passed. 10 minutes? An hour? A lifetime? Eventually, he crept out, took a different path back. Through narrow alleys, no lights, never looking back. When his hand touched the front door's handle, a meow sounded behind him. But it wasn't a cat. It was a person mimicking a cat. Drawn out, distorted, choked like someone being strangled mid-meow. He slammed the door shut. The next morning, Liam told no one. Didn't call the police. No one would believe him. No cameras, no footprints, only a long scar across his hand, a blood-stained shirt hidden deep in a drawer, and a fear that simmered like a fever that would never break. Liam never went out past 9 p.m. again. He avoided the park, avoided cats, even avoided the sound of rain on the roof because it reminded him of the slapping footsteps behind him. Every time it rained, every time the power went out, every time a cat cried in the night, he asked himself, who was that man? And did he know who I was? He didn't know. And that, it was scarier than any answer ever could be. Northern California has places that maps can't capture truthfully. There are nameless rivers, turns that lead nowhere, and dense forests no one remembers why they were abandoned. Emma, 29 years old, heartbroken and mentally drained, chose a place like that for her retreat. And that river, that nameless patch of nowhere absent from Google Maps, it was the one that had called her back. She discovered it 3 years ago when she lost control of her car on a solo trip collecting reference photos. A green-black bend of water, coiled like a sleeping python in the middle of a primeval forest. No ranger station, no signs, no cell signal, only water, trees, and the absolute absence of the world. Emma returned on a gray autumn morning. She told no one, marked nothing on her calendar. She simply drove alone to that place, bringing with her a tent, dry food, a small pocket pistol, and an old journal that never had more than 3 lines written in it. The path to the river was so narrow that the branches scraped her car's paint like claws. By the 3rd curve, she saw 2 trucks parked by the roadside, one ivory white, the other an old gray. No people, but the engines were still warm. She set up camp at a more remote bend in the river. While walking along the bank to collect water, Emma spotted 2 men fishing across the water. One was tall and bearded. He looked like he'd wandered off from a logging site. The other was shorter, with eyes that never seemed to blink. As she walked past, the tall man stood up clumsily, pulling his coat over something shiny. "We're just shooting cans. Didn't mean to scare you." A harmless phrase, but no one says that unless they already did something worth hiding. She nodded, forced a polite smile. But from that moment on, she felt something watching her back. Constantly. That afternoon, a light drizzle began. The kind of rain that makes you stay in your tent but not quite fall asleep. When Emma stepped out to the riverbank holding a half-wet book, she saw Lucas, the tall man from before, standing alone on the opposite shore. He waved. His voice cut through the drizzle. "What's your name?" Without thinking, Emma replied, "Emma." Lucas gave a slight nod. Then, almost like he had planned it, he pulled out a disposable camera, raised it, and clicked. Click. He took a photo, said nothing, turned and vanished into the trees. In the era of smartphones and Instagram, who still uses disposable cameras? And why? Photograph someone from a distance, then leave. Not to preserve a memory, but as if marking prey. That night, rain came down in sheets. Wind clawed at the tent like fingernails scratching nylon. Emma lay frozen in her sleeping bag, gripping her pistol. Every nerve in her body screamed red. And then she heard it. Footsteps. On wet ground. Each step is slow, unhidden, deliberate. She opened her eyes, grabbed her flashlight, unzipped the tent door. The beam sliced through the darkness. Lucas stood there, holding an axe, its handle caked in mud, a dark red smear staining the wood. He said nothing, didn't move. But Emma saw clearly blood on his sleeve. And his boots, heavy hiking boots with steel studs, not fishing shoes. Before she could raise her gun, a sharp screeching sound rang out from the woods behind her, like metal scraping stone. Not Lucas, not alone. Emma aimed the pistol. Her voice was as cold as the bullets in the chamber. "Drop the axe, walk away, or I shoot." Lucas didn't budge, only mouthed the words, I didn't mean to come here, but Ivan told me to. Ivan." The sentence trailed off. He glanced past Emma into the dark behind her, as if waiting for a nod. Emma fired. The bullet struck a tree trunk just above his head. Lucas flinched, dropped the axe. "Last warning, drop your gear, take off your boots, turn around." He obeyed. Slow, like a sleepwalker. She ordered him to back away, then threw his boots into the forest, as if severing his way back. She didn't check if Ivan existed, maybe because she feared that if she looked into the forest, Ivan would look back. Emma packed in 5 minutes, left the tent, left the mat, took only 3 things: her gun, a knife, and her flashlight. She walked the path back the way she came. The rain kept falling as if it would never end. When she got cell service, she called the police, reported a man with a weapon, signs of mental instability, and the repeated mention of someone named Ivan. No one found anything. No Lucas, no Ivan. Only 2 abandoned trucks, unlocked, no papers, no trace. Emma never returned to that river, but the nightmares didn't leave her. Sometimes, in the middle of a rainy night at home, she'd wake to the sound of screech, screech outside her window, or a camera flash flickering in her subconscious, or a wind that whispered, "Ivan told me to." And the most chilling part? She wasn't sure anymore that she was the only one who survived, only the one who came back. She couldn't remember the last time she genuinely laughed. Maybe it was that afternoon a month ago when Ron, her now ex-boyfriend, was still making her mint tea in the mug she always joked looked like it belonged to someone's grandfather. After a year, they broke up, not because of betrayal, but because the silence between them had gradually thickened, like the October fog in northern towns. That evening, Boston was damp. The water stains under the streetlights made her feel like she was walking through a surrealist painting. She pulled her long coat tighter and stepped into Stark's bar, a shabby but quiet place where the two of them once burst out laughing over a missed pool shot. But tonight, she was alone, truly alone. He approached just as she was about to lift the cue stick. "Need a partner?" he asked. His voice was deep, smooth like velvet, but there was something cold about it. She glanced at him. He looked around 25 or 26, tall, with tousled brown hair like he'd just taken off a cap, his eyes obscured by glasses fogged slightly with condensation. "Sure," she said. "Are you any good?" "Just good enough to lose to you," he smiled. They played 4 games. He wasn't great, but never seemed flustered. In fact, every move of his was intentionally slow, as if he were measuring her reactions more than aiming at the balls. He asked about her interests, music, and books. When she said she liked horror novels, he asked, "Stephen King or Clive Barker?" "King," she replied, "because he turns the most ordinary things into nightmares." He just smiled, lips pressed tight, no teeth showing. "Want to come to my place? Keep playing?" he asked. His tone suddenly shifted, light, almost like the breeze before a storm. She froze, not at the question, but the look in his eyes. They were no longer calm. They were hollow. Not human eyes, but those of something merely wearing a human face. "No thanks," she replied with a soft laugh, trying to sound casual. "You'll need to win a few more games first." His face distorted slightly, like a reflection warped in a fogged-up mirror. The smile vanished. His eyes hardened. "Are you serious?" he asked, stepping closer. She stepped back. He grabbed her wrist tight. His fingers were icy, clamping down like steel wires. Before she could react, an old man at the corner of the bar yelled, "Let her go!" He hesitated, muttered a curse under his breath, then yanked her handbag. 2 other men from a nearby table stood up. One pulled her back. The other shouted, "Let go!" "We're calling the cops." He tossed the bag onto the pool table and dashed out the door. She stood frozen, as if turned to stone. On the way home, she flagged down a yellow cab. The driver, a kind-faced middle-aged black man, only said, "Where to, miss?" "Back Bay, near Copley," she croaked. She got home safely. Or so she thought. As she fumbled for her keys, she instinctively pulled out her phone. A notification appeared. "An AirTag that doesn't belong to you is moving with you." She froze. Her blood went cold. Hands trembling, she searched her bag. There it was. A small white coin-sized plastic disc, an AirTag. He must have slipped it in when he grabbed her bag. What followed felt like a nightmare. She threw it to the floor and stomped on it. Once, twice, until it shattered like an eggshell. Her heart was pounding. Outside, the wind howled through the old window frames. She locked herself inside with 3 bolts, tried turning on Netflix to calm down. But then, through the window, she saw it. A silver-gray Lincoln gliding past. Its headlights painted her wall like bleeding streaks. She gasped. The car circled again, slower this time, almost crawling over the pavement. A third time, it stopped, right outside her house. Then she saw it. The driver's left hand emerged, holding something sharp. The streetlight glinted off it. A knife. She dropped to the floor, crawled into the corner beneath the window. She held her breath like holding water in cupped palms. Her heartbeat thudded so hard she felt it shake the floor. The car didn't move for 10 minutes. Then, silence. And then, it vanished. She waited an hour. No sounds, no lights. The next morning, she told her parents. Her father was furious. Her mother cried. They called a family friend. He was a police chief. He said, "No plates, no cameras, nothing we can act on, no evidence, no suspect, only fear." That night she didn't sleep. She heard the soft crunch of tires, or maybe it was just her mind, but what haunted her wasn't the act of being followed. It was the feeling that she was still being followed, that the man never left, that every time she stepped outside, those eyes were still watching. From inside a car, behind a tree, at the end of an alley, or from behind the glass of her second-floor window. Sophia never thought she'd get used to the feeling, that moment when a normal night suddenly turns wrong. As a seasoned bartender at a luxury rooftop bar where she served cocktails to impeccably dressed souls with empty eyes, Sophia had learned to spot the unusual ones. They didn't have to speak. They didn't have to move. She could feel it, like a sudden gust of cold wind across the nape of her neck in the middle of summer. And that night, he walked in, carried by that same chill. He stopped right at the doorway. Gaunt face, drenched black hair like he'd walked through a storm, a worn-out leather jacket dyed by smoke and time. He didn't look like the regular patrons. No cologne, no watch, none of that feigned confidence. He carried only one thing: hatred. He walked straight to the bar, ignoring everyone in the room. His eyes locked onto Sophia's, sharp, unwavering, like a pin stabbing through flesh. "Double Jaeger," he rasped, a voice mixed with hunger and threat. She nodded, poured the drink, her hand trembling slightly, not out of fear, but because something in his eyes reminded her of cornered animals about to lash out. She placed the glass in front of him and turned to leave, when he suddenly said, "I know you're here, Sophia." His eyes didn't blink, like he was staring into a mirror inside her mind. Sophia froze. She didn't recognize him. "You've got the wrong person," she replied, trying to keep her voice calm. "I know what you did." He downed the drink in one gulp, stood, and left, like a nightmare brushing past, leaving only the stench of death behind. Her shift ended near 2 a.m. Sophia drove back to her small apartment in a suspiciously silent building complex. Everything seemed fine. She double-locked the door, turned on the living room lights, and played soft music. But something still felt stuck in her chest. She dozed off on the couch. 3:12 a.m. She woke with the distinct feeling of being watched. No sounds, no breeze. But the air smelled wrong, metallic, rusty. Or was it blood? She turned her head slowly, and she saw him. In the corner of the room, next to the shoe cabinet, a figure stood still. No breathing, no movement, just standing, as if he had been there all night. Sophia couldn't scream. Her throat closed, clutched tight by invisible hands. He wore a hood. Only the bedside lamp cast a dim glow on half his face, and it was him. The man from the bar. He said nothing, didn't move closer, just watched. In seconds that stretched into centuries, Sophia truly believed she would die. But then survival kicked in. She bolted from the couch, stepped on a broken glass, blood burst from her foot, but she felt nothing except pure terror. He flinched and ran, swift as a gust of night wind. The door slammed open. Sophia gave chase, but he was gone. She returned, lights still on, no sign of forced entry. Then she saw it, a knife on the floor near where he stood. One of her kitchen knives, but honed to a surgical edge. The tip was stained with a reddish-brown streak, rust, maybe, or something else. Sophia trembled as she picked up her phone and dialed 911. Her voice was barely coherent between sobs and panic. Police arrived in 10 minutes. They checked every lock, every corner. No signs of forced entry, no signs of a break-in. The question was, how did he get in? Sophia told them about the bar encounter. The police requested surveillance footage from her workplace. The video was grainy, but clear enough. He stood across from her, spoke, then walked away. But here's the strange part. No one knew who he was. No records, no transaction, no fingerprints on the glass. And the glass itself? It vanished by the end of the night. Most disturbing of all, no one saw him leave through the main entrance. The police said they would investigate. Nothing came of it. Sophia stopped sleeping. She began hearing strange sounds. Footsteps at exactly 2:47 a.m., the kitchen faucet turning on when she sat only feet away. One night she found her bedroom window slightly ajar, though she swore it had been locked. He hadn't broken in. He never left. She moved, changed the locks, stayed temporarily at a friend's house, and then, 1 week later, while packing, she opened a drawer in her desk. Inside was a small note, written in red ink. "I don't need a door to enter. I just need a crack in memory, a crack in the mind." The police never caught him. No images, no prints, no name, only fear, like a long shadow dragging behind Sophia every time the lights went out. She knows he's not gone, because every night she still feels breath on the back of her neck. And in every nightmare, there's always a man standing silently in the dark, knife in hand, smiling, and eyes that hold nothing. James didn't believe in ghosts, at least not before he met them. Working the night shift as a bartender at a suburban bar restaurant outside Baltimore, he'd grown used to all kinds of weird drunks, fights, once even a guy vomiting across the counter. But what happened that night wasn't like anything he'd ever experienced. The bar sat in the middle of the old downtown district, built from red brick with the heavy wooden doors, and classic jazz always humming from ceiling speakers. Weekends were usually packed, but that night, Friday with a light rain, only a few tables were taken. Dim lights flickered on glassware like glowing spirits. James was mixing a gin and tonic when they walked in. They arrived quietly, a frail elderly couple. The man wore a faded silver-gray suit, the woman a floral shawl with a vintage pattern. Both were ghostly pale, eyes sunken, still as if they didn't belong to this time. They chose the darkest booth in the room, booth 12, by the frosted window no one liked. Customers always complained it was too cold, too gloomy. No one ever sat there, except them. James glanced up, then returned to his work. But when he looked again, something struck him. They hadn't ordered anything. No one had handed them a menu. They hadn't waved or spoken. They just sat there and stared at the wall. 30 minutes passed, still there, motionless like statues. James, always observant, began to feel an odd chill, like he was being watched by something unseen. He used the excuse of wiping tables to approach. "Evening, folks? Can I get you anything?" No reply. Then the man slowly turned his head, so slow it was almost mechanical. His eyes were like ice. He shook his head once. Just once. No words. The woman kept staring at the wall. Behind the bar, James poured himself a cold glass of water, trying to chase away the strange chill crawling up his spine. He turned to his coworker, Ellie. "Did you see that couple over there?" Ellie blinked. "What couple?" He pointed toward the far corner. "Booth 12. She frowned. "Are you okay? Booth 12's been empty all night." James spun around. Empty, but he'd seen them, clear as day. He could recall the exact folds in the woman's shawl. Trying to stay calm, James went back to work. But small things started happening. The light above booth 12 flickered erratically. The temperature in that area dropped lower than the rest of the room. One woman at a nearby table leaned in and asked James, "Is this a costume gig? That elderly couple over there? They look so real?" James froze. No one else could see them. Later, after his shift, James checked the security cameras. No one had entered the front door during that time slot. Yet the footage showed blurry motion at booth 12, like figures caught in fog. Disturbed, James started digging. He asked the former manager. He searched the archives. And then he found it. A yellowed newspaper clipping. Elderly couple killed in car crash outside local restaurant 1983. They had just finished dinner inside. Husband died with a smile on his face. Wife died instantly, still holding the menu. James stared in silence. Booth 12. From that night on, James felt their gaze from the corner, even when booth 12 was empty. Once, while clearing a table, he found a vintage handkerchief with lace trim, embroidered with the letter L. No one claimed it. He locked it in the drawer behind the bar. That night, it vanished. On a stormy night, James was working the shift alone. At 2:13 a.m., the lights flickered. The bar was empty, but from booth 12 came a whisper. He walked over. The booth was empty, except for an old worn menu lying on the table, the kind they stopped using a decade ago, scrawled on the paper in faded black ink. "We never left. If someone sees us, we return." James quit a month later, but every night since, he dreams the same dream: an empty bar, spoons clinking softly, faint laughter, and the couple always sitting in booth 12. In those dreams, the man always turns to look at James. In his eyes, something bottomless. Then he smiles. Gentle, almost affectionate. "Thank you for seeing us. Now, you're part of this place." I used to think the worst thing a date could bring was a lukewarm coffee or a boring conversation. I was wrong. The worst is when you let someone into your life because of a smile, only to realize much later that the smile never reached their eyes. I was 22 that year, young enough to believe in good things, and just old enough to think I could spot danger from a glance. But Hunter was different. I met him on a dating app. You know, the kind you swipe right on if someone has clean hair and can spell properly. His profile picture was a sleepy-looking selfie, dim lighting, a half smile, like he'd just thought of something interesting but didn't feel like sharing. I'm not sure what made me agree to meet him. Maybe because he looked normal. The first date was over coffee, a little cafe on a street next to an old library where everything smelled faintly of damp books and burnt waffles. Hunter sat at the back table, nodding when he saw me come in. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just a nod, a slow nod, almost like he was sizing me up. He had a low, raspy voice, like every word dragged itself through gravel. His story was suspiciously ordinary, majored in something I don't remember, used to bartend, now working on freelance projects. The kind of person whose words you can't recall after the fact, only their eyes. The way he looked at you didn't feel like conversation. It felt like documentation, like he was storing every little detail deep in his mind. The date lasted less than an hour. I made an excuse about being busy. He nodded. "That's fine," he said. "I like to keep things tidy too." It was a normal sentence, but the way he said it as if he was the one organizing everything made my skin crawl. I told myself, maybe I'm just overreacting. Maybe everyone feels a little cautious with someone new. Maybe I've read too many horror stories. I went home, got into bed, and tried not to think about the way his eyes had followed me out of the cafe, as if I hadn't really left, as if he was still holding on to me, with that stare. That was the first time. And if I had been wiser, it should have been the last. The second date took place at a dimly lit bar where jazz music drifted like old cigarette smoke. We drank gin, the kind that tastes like dried fruit and regret. Hunter talked more than he did on the first date, about noir films, about misfits, about loneliness in a big city. He spoke in a calm, emotionless voice, but his eyes always seemed to be searching for something. Just behind me. Bars like this always feel like stages, he said, taking a sip. Everyone's playing a role, but not everyone knows they're acting. I laughed, leaned back, and tried to lighten the mood. But something about the way he said it gave me chills, like he was auditioning for the lead role in a play I hadn't read the script for. The date ended with a kiss, quick, dry, emotionless, like an ink stamp on a receipt. I don't know why I let it happen. Maybe I felt awkward turning away. Maybe part of me still wanted to believe he was just a bit odd, not dangerous. I went home, lay still in the dark, and kept thinking about that kiss. Not because it was romantic, but it felt empty. As if I'd just signed something, without reading the fine print. The third date was dinner at an Italian restaurant tucked in an old part of town. He ordered for both of us. "You'll like this one," he said, and I didn't argue. Hunter began asking more personal questions about past relationships, family, and daily routines. Not in a curious or sweet way, but like he was collecting data, as if he were building a profile. "You always turn off the living room light at 11 p.m., right?" he said suddenly. I froze. "How do you know that?" He shrugged. "Just a guess." I laughed, but something inside me curled tight, cold, colder than the untouched glass of ice water on the table. The fourth date was the last. This time, I wasn't excited. I went to the bar with the mindset of someone ready to close a chapter. I ordered water. Hunter ordered alcohol, then another, and another. The more he drank, the stranger he became. Not loud, not slurring, just slippery. Like a glossy coat of paint covering deep cracks. He placed his hand on my thigh, leaned in to kiss me, right at the bar, barely 2 handspans away from a stranger. I pushed his hand away, politely but firmly. He smiled, but his eyes didn't. "Not into public affection, huh?" he said. "Or maybe, you're hiding something?" I smiled back, grabbed my bag, and stood up. "I'm tired. I should go." On the way to the parking lot, he said nothing. But the silence felt like a compressed weight between us. Near my car, he stopped me. "Come back to my place?" His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Number, I'm really tired. I have work tomorrow." He smiled, but didn't step back. "I'll drive you to work." "Hunter," I said, firm now. "I can get home by myself." A long pause. His face stayed calm, but his eyes, for the first time, showed something like anger. He stepped back without another word. I hurried to my car. My heart is pounding, not because I feared he'd do something, but because I finally realized I knew nothing about him. I had no intention of seeing him again. But Hunter had other plans. There are some nights you simply can't sleep, not because of coffee or work or a neighbor's barking dog, but because you know someone is thinking about you, not in a romantic way, but in the way someone thinks about you while sitting in the dark, hands on the steering wheel, just waiting for you to make a small mistake, like leaving your bedroom window slightly open. I started noticing it the night I drove home after the last date with Hunter. At first, I wasn't sure. The headlights behind me looked familiar. The way the car kept its distance, not too close, not too far, was just enough to avoid suspicion, but still made the hairs on my neck stand up. I turned left. The car followed. I turned right. Still there. By the third red light, I saw it clearly. A black Toyota, low roof, faded plates. Hunter's car. I pulled over and grabbed my phone, texted, "Are you following me?" A minute later, he replied, "Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you got home safe." That response, short, simple, was what chilled me the most. Not because he was lying, but because he truly believed that was reasonable. I called him. He didn't answer. My heart was pounding in my throat. I slowed down, turned on my left signal, then suddenly veered right, a turn no follower could predict. Seconds later, I pulled over again and shut off the engine. The streetlight reflected off the windshield, lighting up my frozen silhouette. Then a message popped up. "Why did you stop? Are you okay?" I didn't respond. I typed only one sentence. "Stop. Go home." The car behind me sat still for a few seconds, then slowly turned around. No rush, no panic, as if it had finished what it came to do. I got home. The apartment was dark, with only the kitchen nightlight still glowing. I locked the door, twice, checked every bolt like someone with OCD. I was still shaking. The next message came when I was already in bed. "Sorry if I made things weird, I just had a bit too much to drink tonight. Next time, we should just hang out at my place. Quieter, more private." I didn't reply. The next morning, as soon as I woke up, another message waited. "Oh no, is the vibe dead?" An hour later. 3 hours later. "You're really cold, huh?" I took a deep breath, picked up my phone and typed, "I don't think we're a good match. I want to focus on myself right now. Hope you understand." Then I hit send. I thought that would be the end of it. But Hunter wasn't the kind of person who let go. He replied 5 minutes later, "No, I don't understand. You dragged me through 4 dates just to dump me like that? Do you even know how much you owe me? At the very least, pay me back half of what I spent." That's when I sat up straight. Not because of the money, but because how did he know where I lived? How did he know my full name, my house number, my workplace? Like the ones he listed in the next few texts that I won't repeat here. I blocked him, his number, his accounts. I sat in the middle of my room gripping a glass of water. That night, I unplugged the nightlight, pulled the blanket up to my chin, and listened to the wind slipping through the window crack, like a whisper. This isn't over. Some houses are built to make you feel safe. Some rooms, when you step inside, make your heart feel just a little lighter. And some nights, no matter how hard the rain lashes against the windows, you sleep like a baby because you believe no one could ever get past the final lock on the door. But that night was not one of those nights. My parents were out of town. I was alone in the house. And the silence was far too big to be filled by music or lamplight. I was in the attic bedroom, the top floor, a small room with a sloped ceiling, a window facing a row of oak trees where shadows always seemed to move even when there was no wind. I was asleep, and then I woke up, not because of a noise, but because of a feeling. Have you ever felt that? The sensation that someone's watching you in the dark, even though you hear nothing? The feeling that the shadow under your bed is longer than usual? As if it's breathing. I sat up. The phone screen lit up. 3:12 a.m. I hadn't heard anything yet, but I knew. I knew something had entered the house. I slid quietly off the bed, barefoot on the cold wooden floor, trying not to make a sound. I thought about checking, then changed my mind. Number. This was not the time to be brave. I crawled under the bed, phone in hand, switching it to silent. From beneath the hanging bedsheet, I had a narrow view of the hallway. Then I heard the sound of a door opening, not the front door, another door, upstairs, right next to my room. Then, footsteps, slow, deliberate, soft against the carpet, so faint they were more a presence than a sound, like the heartbeat of an old house. A shadow passed beneath the gap under my door. Then, the doorknob turned. The door opened, Someone stepped in. The room sank into darkness. I held my breath, my chest aching from the effort not to make a sound. Someone was rummaging. I heard drawers open, fingers dragging through things, a sock, a notebook. Each tiny sound scraped against my nerves like a blade. Then, he sat on the bed. From under the bed, I saw the shoes. Not sneakers, not dress shoes, old worn-out boots, scuffed edges and frayed seams. The same boots I'd seen Hunter wear on our second date. He just sat there, still, not moving, just sitting. I don't know how long. A minute? 2? A lifetime? Then I heard him whisper, a low, muffled voice, like he was talking to himself. "You think you can just walk away? After everything you opened the door for?" I clamped a hand over my mouth. My heartbeat was so loud that my ears rang. Then he stood up, walked out. His footsteps faded down the stairs, silent and slow. I waited. 5 minutes? 10? 15? When I felt sure, I used the emergency text feature to message 911. I couldn't call. I was still terrified he might be nearby. The police arrived 10 minutes later. I opened the door and nearly collapsed into their arms. They searched the entire house. No one was there, but every window was open. One of them, in the kitchen, had a streak of mud across the sill. Below it, boot prints. The pattern matched the worn white boots. I told them everything. They wrote a report. I was granted a restraining order against Hunter, but the police said, "There's no solid evidence he broke in. No camera, no clear fingerprints. If you didn't see him, the law can't help much." I nodded. But I knew I saw him. Under the bed. In the dark. I knew that cheap cologne. I knew the feeling of him sitting on my mattress, studying every breath I took. That night, I slept at a friend's place, but I couldn't close my eyes. You know why? Because every time I did, I heard his whisper right beside my ear. "You already let me in." I used to think the scariest part of being 12 was getting a bad grade or being laughed at for wearing an out-of-style pink jacket. But then I met Aaron, and I learned that real fear can wear the face of a friend. Back then, I was in 7th grade, just a regular girl in a forgettable town, known only for the row of crimson maple trees that lit up every October. That week was our school's Halloween festival. Woodridge Middle School had a long-standing tradition: turned the old storage building at the back of the field into a haunted house, a half-hearted horror maze the students looked forward to every year. And me? I was too bored to go straight home after class, so I volunteered to stay late and help decorate with a few others. We gathered after school and dragged out fake corpses, cotton cobwebs, creepy laugh sound systems. Hung them from the ceiling, plastered them across the walls. Aaron was one of the kids helping out. Small frame, slightly long hair, eyes that always looked like they were off dreaming somewhere. The quiet type you'd never pay much attention to, if he hadn't suddenly started showing up everywhere. That first day, Aaron just held the flashlight, helped tape up a few dummies. He smiled at me twice, a pale, polite smile, almost too robotic. "I'm Aaron," he said, while I was untangling a string of lights that looked like my entire life in wire form. "Jade," I replied, without looking up. He didn't say anything else. But from then on, wherever I went, Aaron was there. Not close enough to draw attention, but close enough to always be in view. I didn't think much of it. That's just what being 12 is like. Everyone's weird in their own way. I just wanted some pizza afterward, and I got it. Cold pepperoni on the dusty floor of the haunted house. It was drizzling outside, and somehow everything felt more magical than usual. Even the broken light in the corner, blinking erratically, made me smile. Aaron ate very slowly. He didn't look at anyone else, just me, but not in the dreamy, teen movie way. It was the kind of stare that makes you feel like you're being studied, like a mouse in a glass cage. I pretended not to notice. That night, I went to bed early, completely worn out. I remember texting my mom, "I'm fine," like I always did, then placing my phone next to my pillow. Right as I was about to fall asleep. Ting. Messenger notification. Sender, Aaron M. I opened it. The first message was one line. "Jade, I need to talk to you." I was surprised. I didn't remember giving him my Facebook. Maybe I accepted a friend request during the Halloween prep rush without realizing it. I replied, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" No immediate response. But then, the typing bubble appeared. 1 dot, then 2, then 3, and it just kept going. So long I thought my phone had frozen. Then the message arrived. A wall of text, no punctuation, no line breaks. Just a flood of emotion spilling across the screen. Aaron said he had noticed me for a long time, that every time I walked into a room, he couldn't breathe, that he had tried to impress me by kicking the ball harder than anyone during gym class, that he liked my hair when I tied it off to one side, that he hated when I laughed with other boys, that I was driving him insane. By the time I finished reading, my hands were cold, not out of fear, not exactly, but because something in his words felt off. A classmate, someone I'd only known for maybe 2 weeks, was writing like he'd been living inside my head for years. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want to hurt him. Aaron hadn't done anything wrong, not yet. But I also didn't want to encourage whatever this was turning into. Finally, I typed, "Aaron, I don't think we're right for each other that way. I really like you, but just as a friend." I hit send, then lie still in the dark. The nightlight was still glowing dimly. I stared at it, almost wishing it would explode just to break my thoughts. No reply, just that familiar feeling. The one I didn't yet understand, but soon would. The feeling that something had cracked, softly, but deeply. The next day at school, the sky was overcast, and the wind carried the scent of rust from the old track field. I don't know why I remember that smell so clearly. Maybe because that morning was the first time I truly started looking over my shoulder in the hallway. Aaron never replied after I turned him down. No follow-up messages, no online presence, nothing at all. But he was everywhere. During recess, I was sitting under a tree, chewing on a sandwich, when a group of girls from my class ran over, faces lit up like they were about to reveal a huge secret. "Jade, guess what?" one of them whispered. "Aaron told everyone that today you're getting your first kiss." I looked up. "What?" "He said he's going to kiss you, whether you agree or not." I froze. That sentence, told in the playful tone of 12-year-olds, didn't sound like a joke to me. Something about it clung to me, thick and heavy, like the air had just turned solid around my lungs. I left my lunch, got up, and walked straight to the teacher's lounge. I told my teacher. She listened. She nodded gently and said, "I understand. Why don't you stay in the classroom during recess for a few days, just until things calm down?" I nodded. Then I went to the principal. He had the kind of eyes that always looked like they were thinking about something more important. I told him everything. The messages, the forced kiss threat. He said, "We'll handle it. Don't worry." But no one did anything. 3 days later, I found a note shoved under our front door. No envelope, no name, just a crumpled piece of lined notebook paper, folded hastily, its creases wrinkled like it had been balled up and smoothed back out. In a messy black pen, it read, "There's a surprise for you under the silver Cadillac. Go look." I prepared it carefully. It was my brother's car, I crushed the note in my fist. I didn't tell anyone. But that evening, when my brother tried to drive out, the engine wouldn't start. The lights flickered. Then the car went dead. The mechanic came. Couldn't find the problem. Something's clogging the electrical system, they said, like someone pulled some wires, then put them back in wrong, on purpose. I said nothing, but inside, I knew. I started seeing Aaron in strange places, not in class, but on my walk home, at the corner near the bus stop, behind the tree at the back of the school. Every time I turned around, he was there, not coming closer, not saying anything, just watching, like he could wait for me. Forever. Then the messages started. Every morning when I woke up, Messenger had a new message, from an account with no profile picture, a single letter for a name. I'll be walking behind you today. Are you wearing the green hoodie? Jade, you look prettiest standing next to locker 203. You should smile more, especially for me. I blocked the account. The next day, a new one, a new message, the same voice, and the details were too specific to be a prank. One afternoon, I heard a soft click behind me while walking home. I knew that sound. An iPhone camera shutter. I spun around. No one. But I was certain someone had just taken a photo of me from behind. I started dreaming about flashes. I started staring longer into the mirror, just to be sure there wasn't a shadow standing behind me. I told an adult. Again. This time, it was the school counselor. She sat beside me, tapping her pen against the desk, and gave me a half smile. Boys will be boys, Jade, she said. When they like someone, they do weird things. Really, you should feel flattered. You made someone feel that strongly about you. I looked her straight in the eyes, and in that moment, I understood. No one was going to help me. When you're a kid, you think as long as you shut your window, draw your curtains, and lock your door, you're safe. But no one told me there are people who don't need to come inside to be close to you. They just need to stand there and watch. That night was a Saturday. My parents had gone out for dinner. I was home alone. Fall was nearing its end. The wind had grown colder. The sky darkened earlier, and the house felt quieter than usual. I remember exactly where I was. Sitting on my bed, wrapped in a blanket, holding an old iPad, watching cartoons. The only thing left that made me feel like a kid, instead of someone forced to face a fear no adult seemed willing to believe. Outside, there was the night. And that night, someone was waiting. Around 10 p.m., just as the next episode started, I heard a soft tap, not loud, not urgent, more like a pebble gently hitting glass. I froze, muted the sound, and waited. Tap. Again. This time, I was sure. I slid off the bed, quiet as if the floorboards might betray me. The lights were still on. I didn't turn them off. I didn't dare let the room go dark. But I crept to the window and pulled the curtain open just a sliver, and I saw him, Aaron, standing in the middle of the yard under the hazy yellow light of the street lamp. The glow stretched his shadow across the grass like a long, dark smear. No coat, no backpack, just a short-sleeved white button-up. The same one he wore during the haunted house decorating last week. Same wrinkles, same small black paint stain near the cuff. He tilted his head back, staring straight at my window, as if he knew I was there. His face was pale, expressionless, no smile, no frown. Just standing, waiting. I dropped the curtain instantly. My heart thumped so hard it sounded like footsteps inside my chest. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown account. No name, no profile picture. Just one line. Why won't you open the window? I didn't reply. 3 minutes later, another message. I just want one kiss. That's not so much to ask. I gripped the phone tighter, like I could crush it to block out the world. Then came the third message, longer, less coherent, and colder than any wind outside. You're not who I thought you were. You think you're better than me? You think you can fool me and disappear? You'll see, Jade. You'll see. I yanked the curtain back open. No one. The yard was empty. No shadow. No footprints. No eyes peering through the dark. Just me. And the feeling that, even if he had left, he was still very close. I locked my door, propped a chair against it, pulled the blanket up to my chin. My eyes didn't leave the phone screen. I didn't sleep that night. And the next morning, when I finally woke up, eyes burning, body aching, I checked my phone. One last message, sent at 3:12 a.m. I'm still here. You just have to look. I used to think the scariest thing was being watched by someone. But then I realized what's even scarier is telling someone about it and having no one believe you. Monday morning, no rain, but the trees at the school gate were dripping wet, as if something had crawled across them in the night, leaving trails. I was sitting in the principal's office. Next to me was my mom, her hand clenched tight, her voice cold enough to freeze anything it touched. The principal flipped through a notebook, avoided eye contact, cleared his throat. We can't take action unless we have clear evidence that she's in danger. What more do you need? This girl is being stalked, threatened, standing under her window in the middle of the night, my mom nearly shouted. We need verification. And the boy, Aaron, he's always been a good student. Maybe his feelings were misunderstood. Misunderstood. That word filled the room like smoke. Misunderstood. Like someone putting their hands around your throat and they say, "Oh, I just wanted to feel your pulse." My mother went quiet. Then she stared directly into the principal's eyes. A stare so sharp even I flinched. Are you going to wait until something bad actually happens before you do anything? No one responded. Aaron wasn't suspended. I wasn't moved to another class. No apology. No formal warning. He kept coming to school, still walked the hallways, still ate in the cafeteria, but no one saw him smile again. He grew quieter, thinner. His eyes are getting darker every day. And then, one day, he was gone. Not the kind of gone where someone skips school. Really gone. No one knew where Aaron was. No one had seen him come to school that morning. There was no goodbye, no farewell post. Some students said his parents moved away suddenly. Others said he was sent to a boarding school. A teacher whispered he had mental health issues and was receiving treatment. I don't know what's true. I only know I didn't see those eyes anymore, but it never really ended. I stayed at that school for a few more years, went to class, did my homework, laughed with friends, as if everything had gone back to normal. But I knew the truth. Normal is just a mask people wear when something inside them has already cracked. I started to hate fluorescent lights because they reminded me of the night I saw Aaron in the yard. I never slept with the window open again. I never accepted friend requests from strangers. And if someone messaged me without a clear name, even just to say hi, I blocked them immediately. I never saw Aaron again. But sometimes I dream. In the dream, I'm standing at my window. I pull the curtain aside, and someone is standing in the yard, still, unblinking. I never see the face clearly, but I know those eyes. I lived with them for a year, and the dream always ends the same way. A soft tap against the glass. Tap. We grow up. We learn to lock windows, change passwords, move houses. But some stars, once they've touched you, they never go away. Jade, 7 years later. There's one thing no one teaches you about living alone. Silence at night isn't always a sign of safety. Sometimes it's a sign that something is waiting. I was 25 when I met Sarah. young enough to still believe love could start with a right swipe on Tinder, and old enough to think I could tell when something felt off. I lived alone in a 2-story townhouse in the suburbs, the kind of place where everything went still after 10 p.m. I liked that stillness. I liked the soft hum of the fridge at night, the rustle of wind through the trees out back, and the simple peace of not having to share my space with anyone else. And then Sarah came along. I still remember her first photo. Messy brown hair like she'd just gotten out of bed, a sideways smile, and eyes that looked straight into you like a question that didn't need answering. She messaged first. "Hey, I like the shirt you're wearing in your third photo." Not the usual small talk. She noticed things, and I, like the lonely fool, too used to being ignored, felt something stir in me from that tiny detail. Our first date was at a little Italian place just down the street from my house. I arrived 10 minutes early, nervously fidgeting with the cuff of my shirt because my hands were sweating. When she walked in, the whole room seemed to soften. Sarah wasn't the kind of beautiful that turned heads. She was the kind that made you forget what you were about to say. She was smart, funny, attentive. Whenever I stumbled over a sentence, she'd finish it, like she already knew what I was going to say. I went home that night with a stupid grin on my face, and just as I got into bed, my phone buzzed. "I had a great evening. I think there's something really special about you. Sleep well." We kept seeing each other. Second date, a walk through the park. Third date, cooking dinner at my place. Within 3 weeks, she was practically living at my house on weekends. And I, someone who once thought he loved freedom above all, started getting used to the sound of soft footsteps on the stairs, the faint scent of her perfume on my towels, and long strands of her hair tangled in my comb. Sarah made me think that everything might actually turn out okay. She asked about everything. "Where are you going today? Did you eat? Who just texted you?" At first I thought it was sweet, a kind of caring I wasn't used to. I remember one evening, I hadn't replied to her messages because I was stuck in an online meeting, and then the phone rang. And then, the doorbell. Sarah was standing there, eyes red, voice shaking. "I thought something happened to you. Do you know how worried I was?" I apologized. I hugged her. I said, "I'm okay." But in that moment, something tiny flickered inside me. A feeling that I wasn't being cared for, but being checked on. I brushed it off, because I told myself, love is learning to accept the intensity of another person. Because I had always wanted someone who cared enough to walk into my life. What I didn't realize, it was that Sarah didn't walk in. She moved in. She wasn't visiting. She was staying, whether I wanted her to or not. I used to think loneliness was the scariest thing, but later I learned some people aren't afraid of being alone because they always bring themselves along, even when you never invited them. It started with little questions, then location tracking, and then I no longer knew where I ended and she began. Maybe Sarah had erased the line long before I noticed. I started feeling something was off around week 6. It happened while I was at Phil's place. An old friend and coworker. We'd hang out on weekends, watch football, eat cheap pizza, and talk about nothing. That night, I left my phone in the other room. When I finally checked it after 3 hours, I saw 16 missed calls, 9 texts, 4 voicemails. The first message read, "Where are you?" Then, "Why aren't you answering me?" Then it escalated. "Why are you lying?" "I know you're at Phil's. I'm coming over." Sarah did come. When she stepped out of the small car parked 2 houses down, I was still holding the phone, not having typed a word back. Phil stood beside me, frozen. Sarah didn't even look at him. Just me. Her eyes cut through my jacket, through my ribs, straight into something softer inside. You knew we had plans tonight, didn't you? She didn't raise her voice, but each word felt like fingers tightening around my throat. I mumbled an apology, promised I'd head home. She said nothing more, just turned away. But I knew some part of that night had been marked, like something written in invisible ink. After that, everything changed. She suggested, no, she demanded that we share real-time phone location. For peace of mind, she said, so I won't worry. I agreed, partly out of guilt, partly because I thought it would be temporary. It was never temporary. Soon, Sarah knew where I was every hour of every day. She called if she saw me idling too long at the gas station. Why aren't you home yet? She messaged if I went to the cafe near my office. You said you were tired. Why are you at Starbucks then? Once I forgot to charge my phone and the battery died. 10 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. It was Sarah, soaked from the rain, skin pale. The shirt was clinging to her, but her eyes not wet at all. You think I wouldn't know? I felt scared, not because she yelled, not because she smashed things, not because she did anything loud, but because she didn't. She just stood there, silent, watching, like she was recording every second, to replay it later, to study it like a glitch in the system. I started to feel myself disappearing. The house was still mine, but every object, from the shampoo in the shower, the towels on the rack, even the new shower curtain, they were all chosen by Sarah. She began leaving clothes in my closet, shoes in my rack, photos of us on my nightstand, photos I never printed. She never officially moved in, but somehow she was everywhere. One night I woke up just before 3 a.m. No clear reason, just a feeling that something was off. I got out of bed, walked to the kitchen for water. As I passed the storage room, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. I paused, looked inside. No one. Of course not, but hanging on the hook was my gray hoodie, the one I lost 2 years ago. I asked Sarah about it the next morning. Did you go into the storage room? She tilted her head, sipped her coffee. Why do you ask? That gray hoodie. I thought I lost it. Now it's just there. Oh, I found it behind the couch a few weeks ago. Washed it and hung it up. I figured you just forgot. She smiled, but I couldn't, because I was sure I never told her I lost that hoodie. To love someone is to open a door for them. But when they start opening every other door, even the ones in your mind, love stops being the right word. At that point, you're not living with them. You're living inside them, whether you want to or not. Or people say breaking up is an action, but for some, it's just an idea, and ideas don't go away easily. I decided to break up with Sarah on a Friday night. I remember it clearly. No rain, but thunder in the distance. Every time it rumbled across the sky, it felt like the house was holding its breath with me. I didn't do it face to face. I wasn't that brave. I wrote a long message, gentle, kind, painfully honest. I think we need some space. You're a good person, but I'm not sure I'm okay anymore. I hit send, turned off my phone, sat in the dark, hands clenched like a child waiting for the last crack of thunder in a storm. When I turned my phone back on, 27 messages. What do you mean? I don't understand. Are you joking? No, no, no. Then came the calls, voicemails, and finally, one last text. You'll regret letting me go. I blocked her number, turned off location sharing, deleted Tinder altogether. That should have been it. The first 3 days were eerily quiet. I started to think maybe she'd accepted it. I started sleeping again, eating properly, working better. What I didn't know was that she had found another way in. On the 4th night, I woke up to a faint click, like the dry creak of a rusty door hinge in the wind. I went downstairs. Everything was in place. But there was a smell. Something that didn't belong to me. A soft, sweet floral scent, like the perfume Sarah used to wear. I caught it in the kitchen, on a hand towel. I told myself I imagined it. The next night, I got home late, found the bedroom window wide open, even though I had definitely closed it that morning. The pillow was slightly shifted. The blanket had a strange fold near the foot of the bed. Nothing was missing, nothing broken, but something had been there. Like someone had been sitting, waiting, and left just before I returned. I checked all the locks, still locked. I installed a video doorbell, changed the Wi-Fi password, told myself, "You're just being paranoid. No one breaks in just to sit on your bed." But then, Sunday night, I was lying on the couch watching Netflix. It was nearly midnight. I got hungry, got up to make some instant noodles. As the microwave beeped, I returned to the living room, about to hit play, and saw that the storage room door was ajar. I was sure I hadn't opened it. I always closed that door. The hinge was crooked, and if you didn't close it right, it would creak when the wind blew. I froze, then slowly stepped forward, gripping a dinner knife. I pushed the door open. No one. But on the floor, a pink cloth bracelet, the one I'd seen on Sarah's wrist during our second date. A gift from her mother, she'd told me. Something I had never owned. I didn't call the police. I tore up the bracelet, threw it in the trash, and slept in my car that night. The next morning, I came back to the house, exhausted, furious. I changed the locks, installed indoor cameras, opened every closet and searched every corner. No one. Nothing. Except a small slip of paper beneath my pillow. Handwritten, slanted, delicate. "Don't do this to me. I don't deserve to be left behind. I've been here, just waiting. Quietly. There are some people who don't leave. They just stay in a different way. They don't need to be at your door. They just need to know where you keep your knives. What time do you fall asleep? And the sound the microwave makes when your back is turned. Not all silence is emptiness. Some silences are holding their breath." I called 911 at 3 a.m. The official report said, "Suspected intruder." But deep down, I already knew who it was. I hadn't woken up from a sound, but from a feeling. The kind of feeling you get when someone's watching you sleep. Not bending over, not speaking, just standing, watching. The room was unnaturally cold, even though the heater was on. And there was a smell, that strange mix of stale skin trapped in a closed space, blended with the cheap perfume that used to cling to Sarah's collars whenever she hugged me a little too long. I turned on the light. Nothing seemed out of place, until my phone lit up. Unknown number, 7 consecutive messages. "I miss you. I'm closer than you think. Are you awake? Wake up. I can see you." I grabbed the phone, turned to look at the closet. I don't know why. There hadn't been a sound, no shadow, just a sliver of space. The door, usually shut tight, was slightly ajar, just wide enough to slip a knife through, or a stare. I picked up the kitchen knife from the bedside table. My hands shook. My heart thudded like a hollow drum in my chest. I crept forward, then said aloud, "I know someone's in there." No response. I held my breath, put my hand on the doorknob, and opened it. Sarah lunged out like something yanked straight from a nightmare. Her shirt was torn, hair matted with sweat, eyes bloodshot like something inside had cracked open. She screamed one word, "No!" I stumbled back, but not fast enough. Sarah pinned me to the floor. Her arms were like stone. The knife clattered to the tiles, cold, metallic, final. She gripped my wrists, leaned in. Her breath came in sharp, uneven bursts, close enough for me to smell that faint, minty scent I used to love. "Don't you get it?" she hissed. "Everything I've done is because I love you." I couldn't speak. My throat was dry as paper. She picked up the knife, placed the tip right above my collarbone, like she was testing fabric before the first cut. "Just a little piece. I want to keep a part of you. I used to be in your heart. Now, I'll take something from the outside." I screamed, not words, just a raw, scraping sound from somewhere deep inside. And then, sirens. Footsteps thudding down the hallway. The door burst open. Sarah shrieked like a wounded animal, backed away, raised the knife at the officers. They subdued her. I sat on the floor, back against the wall. The house felt like a walk-in freezer, even though every window was shut. The police pulled me outside. They asked 100 questions. I only asked one. How long had she been in there? One of the officers looked at me, hesitantly. "We found a sleeping bag, dried food, water bottles, and a burner phone in your attic. Looks like she'd been living there for days, maybe a week. She was living right above me, coming down while I slept, eating while I wasn't listening, watching me." No one said anything after that. I left that house the next morning, didn't take anything but my coat and my phone. I never went back. They say jealousy is a sign of love, but I've learned someone can love you so much. They'll live beneath your roof, inside your walls, in the breath you exhale each night. They don't need to be loved back. They just need not to be left behind. When someone lives in your house, you can force them out. But if they've already moved into your mind, there's nowhere left to run. Sarah was arrested. The case was closed under charges of unlawful entry, assault with a deadly weapon, and attempted bodily harm. She was sentenced to prison. No one asked me if I wanted her punished. No one asked if I could still sleep at night. I moved. Got rid of everything I owned, even changed my number, deleted every social media account. I wasn't me anymore. I was a thinner version, quieter, like someone who had survived a house fire. Skin intact, but something inside charred. I thought that was the end. But then, about 2 months later, on a humid night, I woke up at exactly 3:12 a.m., not from a noise, but from a dream. In it, I was back in the old house. At first, everything felt normal, familiar. The rug, the coffee table, the peeling patch on the wall. Then I heard breathing, software, steady. From inside, the closet. I woke up, heart pounding like it had been clutched in someone's fist. My room was empty, the closet door shut, but I couldn't fall back asleep. The next week, I started hearing things at night. Nothing loud, nothing obvious, just something. Enough to wake me from a medicated, heavy sleep that even sleeping pills couldn't hold together. I checked the security cameras. Nothing. I checked the locks. No signs of intrusion. But every morning, a chair slightly out of place. A towel was disturbed. A blank sticky note on my desk. Pristine white, as if someone had written something, then torn it off. I told no one. Who would believe me? Sarah was in prison. Everything was secure. Triple locks, high-end alarm system, full HD surveillance. Only I knew. None of that matters if someone has already lived inside your mind. That night I tried something. I sat in the dark, in my room. Lights off. Phone set to record audio. I tucked into bed. Closet shut. Curtains drawn. The next morning, I played back the file. At minute 47, there was a voice. A woman's voice, whispering, "Do you miss me?" Then, something like a laugh, not loud, but very close. I deleted the file, then threw the phone into the kitchen sink. Then I moved. Again. Now I live in a small apartment, single level, no built-in closets, no attic. No one knows where I am. But sometimes, when I'm watching TV or rinsing shampoo out of my hair or just lying in bed, My eyes drift toward the darkest corner of the room, the one no light ever really touches, and I wonder, how long had she been there before I noticed? Some people come into your life through the front door, some slip in through the windows, and some crawl into the closet and stay. James wasn't the superstitious type. He believed in real things: cracked dashboards, frayed seatbelts, rough roads, and delivery deadlines. He'd been driving across the U.S. for nearly 16 years and had survived long enough to know that the only things that could kill him weren't ghosts or demons. It was a cold cup of coffee or dozing off at 3 a.m. But that night smelled different. He was on the loneliest stretch of Route 66, heading toward Santa Monica. Alone, in pitch darkness, the headlights of James's semi, which had been dim for 3 weeks, barely lit up a faint yellow strip ahead, as if the darkness was slowly devouring everything in front of him. He hadn't fixed the lights, simply because there hadn't been time, and because, well, no one really expects anything bad to happen out here in the middle of nowhere, where there's nothing but sand and old bones. There was no moon in the sky, no stars, nothing at all, as if even God couldn't be bothered to look this way. He turned on the radio, just static, switched the channel, still just white noise, empty sound, echoing like it came from a long deserted hallway. He cursed under his breath, shook his head, then reached for a can of energy drink, now cold, took a sip, and tasted nothing but metal. The road stretched endlessly. Now and then, James passed a toppled utility pole, rusted steel frames, or worn-out road signs with letters nearly erased. Route 66 had once been the American dream. Now it was the gatekeeper of things long forgotten. He wasn't afraid of the night, but tonight, something made him shiver. Not from cold, but from how the air seemed to grow heavier with every minute. A silence that wasn't peaceful, but watching. Just a few more hours, James muttered, as if to soothe himself. But deep in his eyes, the darkness didn't recede. It waited, and up ahead was something he had never prepared for. James saw it from afar, a large, silent shape lying across the lane as if someone had abandoned a steel shark in the middle of a desert ocean. At first, he thought it was a pile of junk or a roadkill carcass, but the closer he got, the more he saw a faint glimmer of silver reflecting back from his dim headlights. A Cadillac. Silver. Old. He slammed on the brakes. The screech tore through the still night like metal, screaming from being yanked out of sleep. The Cadillac was parked dead center in the road, as if someone had deliberately placed it there to block his way. No blinkers, no hazard lights. Just the passenger door, wide open like a mouth, gaping, waiting for someone to step inside. The air suddenly felt heavier, stifling. He turned off the radio, not out of fear, but because something needed to be heard. James shifted into reverse, easing the truck toward the roadside, hands gripping the steering wheel out of sheer instinct. He wasn't one to panic easily, but an old Cadillac in the middle of Route 66 at nearly 3 a.m.? That wasn't an accident. That was an invitation. He stepped out, bringing a small flashlight from the cab. The yellowed beam quivered like his hand. His boots tapped softly against the warm asphalt. Route 66 still held the heat of the day, like the belly of a living thing, faintly simmering. He approached the Cadillac. No sound, no movement, just silence, thick and viscous, like molten tar. James tilted his head, leaned in, and shone his flashlight inside the car. No one. Empty seats, no bags, no jacket, no signs anyone had just been there. But the car still held a scent, a mix of motor oil, stale cigarettes, and something else. Sweet, metallic. James felt a surge of dread rise in his chest like a rush of blood. This wasn't right. This didn't feel like a car left behind because it broke down. It felt like someone had just left. Silently, he pointed the flashlight toward the back, walked to the trunk. The handle was stiff, almost locked. He tried to pull. Nothing. No key. James squinted, turned back to the driver's side, and saw the key still in the ignition, though the engine was off. His rational mind told him, "This is your chance to leave. No one's forcing you to touch this." But instinct, the same instinct that got him through nights of black ice and desert storms, whispered, "You need to know." He climbed into the back seat, looking for the latch to fold it down and access the trunk from the inside. The flashlight swayed, revealing something in the darkness behind the leather wall. 2 black trash bags, tightly packed, sealed with duct tape. A rope was tied in a knot around the trunk latch from the inside, as if someone was trying to keep it closed. James held his breath, and then, bang! A gunshot tore through the night like thunder exploding just behind his neck. James jolted up and smacked his head on the roof of the car. His flashlight slipped from his hand and rolled across the floor beneath the seats. In that instant, all he could hear was the pounding of his heart, like hammers on a drum, and the metallic echo of the bullet ringing through the emptiness of Route 66. He didn't wait for a second shot. Sliding out from the back seat, James bolted toward the truck cab like a cornered animal. Only 2 words echoed in his mind. "Get out." His boots clanked loudly against the step into the cab, so loud it startled even him. He jumped into the seat, slammed the gas pedal, his hands trembling as he jammed the key into the ignition. The engine started slower than usual, too slow. "Come on, please come on," James mumbled, praying to no one in particular. The engine roared to life. He shifted into gear when, bang! The second bullet flew past his left side mirror, shattering it into sparkling shards that sprayed across the windshield like glass rain. He floored it. The truck screamed like a beast awakened, surging forward. In the remaining mirror, James caught a glimpse of a tall man, heavily bearded, wearing faded mechanic's overalls, standing motionless in the middle of the road, holding an old hunting rifle, not chasing, not dodging, just standing there, watching, until, bang, the third shot. The bullet slammed into the front of the truck, right beneath where James was seated. It left a deep dent, like a ripe apple punched in, only inches from his chest. James let out a strangled scream, ducking against the wheel, pressing himself down into the seat as if curling up could shield him from bullets. Behind him, an engine growled to life. A sound old and heavy, the Cadillac. He was being chased. That night, Route 66 was no longer just a road. It had become an arena. The old silver Cadillac surged from behind, headlights off, like a massive steel ghost. James could barely see anything but his own dim red taillights and the faint white glow of his shaking GPS screen. The mechanic was closing in on the left. James could see the shadowy figure behind the scratched windshield, rifle raised again, this time aiming directly at the truck's front glass. James swerved hard. The truck's tires screeched against the pavement, a deafening roar. The Cadillac veered off course, slipping to the right, nearly sliding into a ditch. But he didn't give up. 10 minutes, then 15. Then there were 20 minutes of pursuit. James had never imagined an old Cadillac could tail a semi-truck that long on a straight highway. Just as he'd never imagined a complete stranger could calmly pull the trigger 3 times at someone they'd never met, without any clear reason. No threats, no yelling, no robbery, no motive, just shooting and chasing. In the final stretch, when James felt his vision blur from sheer tension, up ahead, flashing lights, blue, red, blue, red. James shouted inside his chest, Police! It's the police! The Cadillac must have realized it too. Suddenly, it skidded sideways across the road, veered off at a sharp angle, and turned down a dirt trail leading into the desert, where the darkness was so dense not even headlights could cut through it. James slammed the brakes near the shoulder, gasping like someone who just escaped a fall off a cliff. James's truck came to a crooked stop on the roadside, its engine still growling like it was panicking. Police lights flashed ahead, 2 patrol cars, one officer stepping out with a cautious hand resting on his holster, his face filled with suspicion. James climbed down, head spinning, hands still shaking. He didn't even know what he said first. He only remembered that when the officer asked, his voice didn't even sound like his own. He was driving a silver Cadillac, old, heavy beard, mechanic's outfit, shot at me 3 times, chased me for 20 minutes. The officer went quiet, then glanced at his partner, whispered something James couldn't catch. Finally, they just nodded. "We'll send a team to check the dirt road. He might have turned into an abandoned property. There are lots of side trails in this stretch." James wanted to scream, "No, he's not a fugitive. He's someone waiting for people like me to drive by." But instead, he just nodded. At that moment, James understood that no one was ever going to find that Cadillac. No one was going to find that mechanic. The police let James go after a brief statement. No one called back, no report, no investigation. That night, James parked at a rest stop less than 80 miles from Santa Monica. He didn't sleep, he didn't eat. He just sat in silence inside the cab, listening to the soft hum of the air conditioner, checking the rearview mirror every 5 minutes. He never drove at night again, not because he feared the dark, but because he knew. Some things in the dark knows exactly who you are. And if you ever find yourself driving along Route 66 at 3 a.m., he might be waiting for you next. Alan, a newly minted truck driver, was struggling through an overnight delivery from New Jersey to Indiana. He'd been driving for over 10 hours, his eyes burning, his brain feeling like someone had stirred batter in it. The only thing keeping him awake was a can of Red Bull, and it was now completely empty. When the GPS indicated a nearby rest stop, Alan didn't hesitate. He turned down a narrow side road, leading to an abandoned gas station where a yellowish light flickered weakly behind a dust-coated window. No other vehicles, no voices, only the wind and the distinct sensation that the ground was listening to every step he took. He stepped inside. No doorbell, no staff, no sound from an AC unit. Everything was drowned in a silence thick as old engine oil. At the far end of the hallway, a faint light spilled from a back room. Curiosity, mixed with exhaustion, led Alan forward. He pushed the door open. Inside was a plugged-in refrigerator, still running but completely empty, no shelves inside, as if someone had taken everything out to do something else. As he quietly closed the door, clang! The sound of metal dropping echoed from the front counter. Alan froze. He heard it clearly. But when he stepped back out, no one. He turned to the glass entrance. It was wide open. Cold wind blew through. And for a fleeting moment, Alan felt he wasn't the only one who had walked into this place, and certainly not the only one leaving it. Alan had never driven in complete silence. Even on midnight runs through snowy mountain passes or pre-dawn hauls across Kentucky, there was always some kind of sound: the radio, the engine, the wind clawing at the trailer. But now, on a highway that stretched endlessly, the only sound was the tires scraping the road, steady and numb, like a hospital clock ticking in a dying man's room. He was exhausted but not sleepy anymore. Every fiber of his body was tight, like Christmas lights plugged into the wrong outlet. When he'd left the gas station, Alan had looked back one last time. The glass door was still slightly ajar, and that yellow light inside hadn't gone out. It seemed to watch him, casting its shadow long down the road. He cursed under his breath and pressed the pedal a little harder, trying to calm himself with music. The radio flickered on, only static. He twisted the dial repeatedly. Not a single frequency came through. Just a strange sound like breathing, sometimes close, sometimes distant, and a few faint scratching noises like fingernails scraping aluminum. Then the curtain behind his cab shifted. Alan stiffened. It wasn't a jolt from a pothole. It moved gently, rhythmically, like a hand had just pulled it back and let it fall again. He glanced up at the rearview mirror. The curtain still hung in place, but it bulged slightly at the back, as if something inside was breathing. He turned off the radio. The air seemed to freeze. The curtain stopped moving. Alan slowly reached for the glove compartment, pulled out his folding knife. The blade snapped open with a click, so sharp and sudden that it startled even him. But he didn't turn around, didn't check. He just placed it on his lap, light as air, but cold as a silent survival vow. He grabbed his phone, fingers trembling as he typed. Nearest police station, 23 minutes away, 3 turns. He began counting every sign, every mile marker, as if each one was a whispered prayer. Then the curtain moved again. This time, like someone inside was sitting up. Alan gripped the steering wheel tightly, his neck instinctively tucking in. He didn't breathe, didn't dare look, just drove, straight, without stopping. The night was just as dark as it had been, but the wind was colder, and the air at the back of his neck heavier. And for the entire ride to the station, Alan never once looked back. But he knew. In a vague yet certain way, he knew. Something had entered his truck back at that gas station, and it had no intention of leaving. Right in front of the police station, a small gray brick building with dim lights, just like every rural precinct he'd ever driven past. Quiet to the point of being unnaturally quiet. He didn't turn off the engine, just flung open the door and jumped out like a man who had just escaped hell. His heart was pounding against his ribs like it might burst. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely grip the glass door handle. Inside, a desk officer looked up and frowned. "You okay?" he asked, voice flat, not bothering to hide his suspicion. Alan gasped. Someone's in my truck. I think they're hiding in the sleeper cab." "You mean like a thief?" "No, I don't know. They haven't done anything, but they're in there. Since the last stop, the curtain, it moved. I didn't open it. I haven't seen them, but I know they're there." The officer stared at Alan for a few more seconds, then stood up and called another officer over on his radio. "Go check the truck," he said. 2 officers followed Alan outside. One kept a hand near his weapon. The other held a flashlight, scanning the truck like they were searching a corpse. The cab door opened. Alan couldn't look. He stood back, heart pounding in his ears. Then, a voice called out, "Found them." One of the officers stuck his head out from the sleeper, his face grim. 3 people, 1 woman, 2 men, hiding beneath the sleeper floor. One of them has a knife. All 3 stared at me like I was the intruder. Alan felt the blood drain from his face. They didn't resist, didn't speak, didn't scream, just stared, like they'd been there for a long time. The police pulled them out, one by one. They weren't in uniforms, they had no bags, no ID. A barefoot woman with tangled hair, a man in a soaked hoodie, like he'd just crawled out of the ground, and the last one, holding 2 rusty folding knives, his eyes hollow like a dried-up well. None of them answered when asked for names. There were no missing person reports matching them. Only one sentence was spoken by the man with the knives, as he looked at Alan with bloodshot eyes. "The road's long and cold. We just needed a ride." The police kept Alan for nearly an hour to write a report, ask questions, and inspect the truck one more time. But despite all their professionalism, despite all the paperwork, there were gaps, blank spaces they couldn't fill. None of the 3 people in custody revealed their identities. They had no injuries, showed no signs of hunger or thirst, and didn't react to any questions. They just stayed silent, as if they were waiting for something to happen, something that didn't belong to this world. When Alan asked if they were criminals, one of the officers only shrugged. Hard to say. No signs of forced entry, could be homeless, or lost, or... He left the sentence hanging, his eyes drifting toward Alan's truck parked in the lot, like he didn't want to know anything more. Eventually, they let Alan go. He returned to his cab, climbing into the driver's seat like stepping into the living room of a house that had just been haunted. Everything looked normal. The curtain was still closed, the sleeper empty, his bag in its usual spot. But something was off. A small folded piece of paper lay on the pillow in the back. He didn't remember leaving anything there. His hand picked it up and opened it. "Thanks for the ride. Sometimes we don't find the way out, but we don't need to." No signature. The handwriting was crooked, like it had been written with the left hand, or by someone who'd never learned to write at all. Alan looked into the rearview mirror. The night wasn't over. The yellow highway lights passed by like drifting ghosts. He folded the note, slid it into his shirt pocket, and started the engine. For the rest of the drive, he didn't turn on the radio, didn't dare look too long into the mirror. And that night, when he pulled into a quiet rest stop about 50 miles from Indiana, Alan locked the doors, shut the curtains tight. But before falling asleep, he glanced over his shoulder one last time, and the pillow had a small indentation, as if someone had just been sitting there moments ago. Some don't knock. They don't walk in. They slip through. In the cracks between exhaustion and inattention. And sometimes, when you think you just need a short rest to make it through the night, they'll rest with you. Vincent had been driving for nearly 10 hours. He couldn't remember the last time he'd taken a break. The forest road ahead stretched endlessly, thick and black as melted asphalt. No gas stations, no lights, no signs. Just trees, and a darkness so heavy you could hear it. His eyelids started to droop, and just then, his headlights lit up something lying in the middle of the road. A child's purple dress. Vincent slammed on the brakes. The truck slowed with a soft screech of the tires. He looked closer. It wasn't just the dress. A few feet away were a pair of small blue shoes, then a red sweater with bear-shaped buttons, and a pair of striped shorts. Everything was scattered, like someone had peeled away the layers of a child's body, and disappeared. He turned off the engine and stepped out. No blood, no signs of an accident. The breeze blew lightly, colder than usual. Not nighttime cold, purposeful cold. Vincent bent down to pick up the dress. The fabric was damp and cold, like human skin left out in the fog. He looked around, ears straining to catch any sound. No cars, no voices, only the wind weaving through the forest, and for a second, he thought he heard breathing. A chill ran down his spine. What crept into him wasn't fear. It was the gut-deep sense that this shouldn't be here. And if someone had left it behind, they didn't want to be found. Vincent stood still, the headlights flickering across the forest's edge. And though he didn't know why, he knew one thing for sure. Tonight, something had begun. Vincent stood frozen on the road, the cold child's dress hanging from his hand, his mind teetering between exhaustion and an unnamed dread. He'd seen crashes before. He'd witnessed brutal wrecks. But what lay in front of him now, those eerily clean clothes scattered across the pavement, this wasn't random. It was arranged, deliberate. He tossed the dress back onto the ground and stepped toward the edge of the forest, where his headlights barely pierced through the first few rows of trees. The air there was thicker, colder, like the trees were hiding something inside them. And then, crack. A soft snap, like a dry twig being stepped on. Vincent whipped around, eyes scanning the dark silhouettes of trees. He held his breath, his ears sharpened. Silence. Then, a scream. Short, high-pitched, sharp enough to slice his eardrums. A child's voice. Vincent flinched. He spun to face the woods, his hands curling as if gripping an invisible steering wheel. "Is someone there?" His voice barely made it out, dissolving into a sea of rustling leaves. No answer. Then, another scream. Identical, but from the opposite direction. Vincent felt his throat dry up. A part of him wanted to run into the woods to find the child, but another part, the part that had survived 2 decades on the road, screamed, "No, something's wrong." He stepped back, eyes locked on the tree line. No movement, no bugs, no breeze, only darkness. And a voice, human-like, but not human. Vincent turned toward his truck, his legs heavy as stone. He reached for the door when... thud. Something hit the truck door. He jumped back, heart seizing in his chest. The headlights caught the shape of a tall, thin man in a baseball cap, standing motionless across the road. He shouted something, a garbled, broken sound, like it didn't come from a human throat. Then he threw something again, this time a metal object. Bang! It struck the passenger window, leaving a spiderweb crack right at Vincent's eye level. Vincent stared at him for several seconds. The man didn't move, didn't approach, just stood there, as if waiting for him to step out of the light. Vincent stood frozen next to the truck, one hand still on the door handle, heart pounding like it was about to explode from his chest. The crack in the window reflected his face like a broken mirror, distorted, twitching, uncertain whether it was him staring back or something else mimicking him from the other side. The stranger remained there, unmoving. He tilted his head in an unnatural way, as if assessing Vincent or waiting for a signal. The dim headlights began to spill light across the edge of the trees. Vincent, drawn by an invisible force, turned back to the forest for one final look. And in that very moment, he saw them. Figures. 3, maybe 4, standing deep within the forest, behind the trunks, not hiding, not moving, just standing there. One of them raised something. Vincent squinted. An old loudspeaker. He recognized that kind. It was the type used for camping, capable of playing pre-recorded sounds. Then, the scream rang out again. From that speaker, he heard the faint static behind the sound, something you only notice with tape recordings or cheap devices. This time, Vincent wasn't afraid in the usual way. He felt chilled to the core, not because the scream sounded real, but because it was designed to sound perfect, in a way only a fake could. They didn't need him to believe there was a child in the forest. They only needed him to doubt, to go check. Vincent slowly backed toward the truck door. The figures in the woods didn't move. The man across the road didn't advance. He threw open the cab door, climbed in, and locked it instantly. His hands trembled as he slid the key in. The dashboard lights flickered. The engine groaned, like the weary roar of an old beast, but it was still alive. As the truck reversed away from the scene, Vincent glanced into the rearview mirror. No one followed. They didn't need to. They already knew where he was going. And on another night, if someone else were to drive this route, Vincent was certain they'd still be there, behind the woods, behind the pile of children's clothes, behind the screams, waiting. Vincent drove for a full hour without stopping, his eyes fixed on the road, but his mind still being pulled back to the forest and those perfect screams. He couldn't remember how many turns he'd taken or how many mile markers he'd passed. But when the lights of a rest stop finally appeared in the distance, his heartbeat began to return to something close to normal. The truck came to a stop. Vincent didn't leave the cab. He wasn't hungry, wasn't thirsty, just drained. But as he reached for the curtain, preparing to get some sleep, he suddenly froze. On the passenger seat, where he was sure there had been nothing, now sat a small purple knit cap. He didn't remember bringing it into the truck, didn't remember picking it up while standing outside in the woods. He didn't touch it, just stared. His eyes locked on that cap for several long minutes before he finally reached for his phone and called the police. He told the whole story, his voice hoarse, broken, like someone speaking through the haze of a fever. The officer on duty said simply, "We've had a few similar calls over the years. No evidence, no missing persons, no one was hurt. But there are patterns, and they usually happen at night." Near Forest Sector, 219, Vincent hung up. The next morning, he made his delivery, on time. No one noticed anything strange. No one asked why he looked like someone who'd just woken from a dream caught between two worlds. From that day on, Vincent avoided his old route. He never turned down roads that led through thick forest, and he never stopped his truck if he saw children's clothing scattered across the pavement. Once, during a dinner with other drivers, someone mentioned an old buddy who saw a tiny shoe lying in the middle of the highway at 3 a.m. Vincent just gave a faint smile. He said nothing. Because some stories, if you tell them, people will think you're losing your mind. But if you keep quiet, you might sleep better, at least until the next night. And if one night you're driving through the dark, exhausted to the point of pulling over, and your headlights catch a small red sweater with bear-shaped buttons lying ahead, just keep driving. Don't stop. Don't get out. Because sometimes the call isn't asking you to save anyone. It just wants you to come closer. You've just heard 3 stories. No one died. No one went missing. But no one was quite the same after that trip either. And you know what? The scariest part, it isn't what they saw. It's the feeling that it might happen again. If you're watching this at night, check your windows. Glance at your rearview mirror and ask yourself, will your next trip really be alone? If you want to hear more spine-chilling stories like these, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and comment with the scariest story you've ever heard. Because who knows, your story might be the one that keeps someone else awake tonight. See you again on another night, when the screen lights up again and the darkness begins to tell its story. Not all summers are warm. Some summers, despite the sun hanging high in the sky, leave you shivering whenever you remember them. The summer I turned 15 was like that. It was the summer Ron, Marcus, and I went to an island none of us had ever heard of. A place not found on any map, and perhaps a place that was never meant to exist. Ron was always the quiet one, the kind of friend who never talked much about his family, but his eyes. There was something in them that made me believe he knew things he would never say. When he told us his family owned a vacation home off the coast of Maine, I laughed. But then I saw how serious he was when he said it. There was a kind of silence clinging to his words, like someone was listening from beneath his skin. Ron's dad drove us to the ferry dock. He barely said a word except for short, barked directions. And every time I coughed or sneezed, He would glance at me through the rearview mirror with a look that made it hard to breathe. There are people whose eyes alone tell you they will never forgive you for existing. He was that kind of person. The house on the island wasn't big, but it stood tall among the gray pines, facing the sea. And even though the sky was still bright, I couldn't shake the feeling that darkness was seeping in through the window frames. The sea didn't crash. The wind didn't blow. Everything stood still, as if holding its breath. The islanders recognized Ron the moment we stepped off the dock, but no one called him Ron. They called him Ronnie Boy, in a flat, soulless tone, as if they had been waiting for him to return. As if, this time, we wouldn't be the only ones leaving. It started with the hat. Not just any hat. It was a white Real Madrid cap, so worn that the logo had faded. But to me, it was the only thing I had left from my father. He'd bought it for me on his final business trip before he died in a car accident on a foggy morning highway, a morning just as hazy as those here on the island. I was sure I had folded it, tucked it carefully into my backpack, but by the second day, it had vanished like it never existed. "I think you left it at the beach," Ron said, voice barely above a whisper. "Hats fly away easily." Marcus just shrugged, fingers tightening around the strap of his backpack like he was holding on to some secret. I didn't say anything, not because I believed them, but because I felt something beginning to fracture in the air around us. The next afternoon, while wiping down my bike frame, I noticed a fountain pen from my collection had also gone missing. I'd been a strange kid, always collecting pens, and I knew every single one remembered exactly where I placed them. The one that disappeared was the last of a vintage set of 4 Parker pens that my mother had bought from an old bookstore in Portland. Marcus glanced over as I dug through my bag, then muttered absently, "I remember seeing you with it yesterday when we biked. Might have dropped it near the pine slope." Harmless words, but his eyes weren't harmless. That night, I pretended to have a headache and went to bed early. The upstairs bedroom was silent, except for the distant hum of insects from the forest. I lay on the bottom bunk, staring at the ceiling with eyes that wouldn't close. Then, around 3 a.m., I heard whispering. At first, it was faint, like wind slipping through a crack in the door. But the more I listened, the more certain I became. It was someone speaking, very close. The sound dragged on, warped like it was coming from some old broken device. A low mumble swallowed by thick, choking darkness. I strained to hear and realized it was coming from Marcus's bed, the top bunk across from me. The terrifying part wasn't the whispering itself. It was that it wasn't just one voice. There were 2. One was asking, one was answering, and neither of them was mine. I lay frozen, every cell in my body strung tight like a wire. The silence around me no longer felt peaceful. It felt like the world was trying to trap me in it. I didn't dare close my eyes, didn't dare move. All I could do was wait, until something worse decided to speak next. I pretended to be sick the next day, not because my head actually hurt, but because something had started to grow inside me, a feeling slick and cold, like the mud at the bottom of a lake. I needed to stay, needed to be alone in the cabin while Ron and Marcus went out with Ron's dad to have dinner in town. Marcus didn't say a word before leaving. He just looked at me, a long, heavy stare, not meaningful, just weighted. So heavy it felt like my sternum was caving in. Once the sound of the old truck's engine faded down the dirt road, I stood up. My heart pounded like the chest of someone trying to escape a morgue. I went straight to Marcus's bag and tore through everything. At first, I was looking for the hat, and I found it, stuffed deep in the bottom of his bag, tangled among old clothes and candy wrappers. Underneath was my fountain pen, then a toothbrush, identical to the one I'd lost. a metal nail clipper, just like the one my mom had packed for me, and a pair of my underwear, washed but no longer smelling like soap. I sank to the floor, back against the wall. A breeze drifted through the window, cold enough to numb my lips. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to clamp them between my thighs to keep them still. And then I saw the notebook. It was at the very bottom, tucked between two thick shirts. A cheap black-covered notebook, the corners curled and worn. I opened it. The first page was a pencil drawing. A human face without eyes, mouth gaping like a pit. Blood spilled down the neck. The next page showed a child hanging from a tree branch, my name written in capital letters beneath it. I kept flipping. The drawings got messier, more deranged. There were people crushed under cars, headless bodies, hands reaching out of bathroom sinks. Some pages were so heavily drawn that the paper had torn, like the artist had pressed the pencil down with a demon's rage. Near the end, I found a page. A drawing of me, nailed to a crucifix, legs severed, mouth wide open, but with no eyes. The entire face was just a blank, white void. And finally, the last page. Only 4 words, scrawled in pencil so dark it bled through to the back of the page. I will do it. Tomorrow. I didn't feel cold anymore. Only the smell of something old, decaying, waiting to come back. I brought the notebook to Ron's dad as soon as they got back. No one asked why I had stayed home, and I didn't explain. I just held the notebook out, my hand trembling like I was holding poison. Ron's father took it, silently flipping through each page. When he reached the drawing of me on the crucifix, I saw it. A slight twitch in his eye. Very subtle, but I saw it. No yelling. No questions. Just a silence so thick it felt alive. "Put it away," he said, his voice rough. Not angry exactly, but definitely not concerned. "And put everything back where it belongs." I stood still. It felt like something was crawling around my ankles, something invisible. "You should do what I said," he continued, not looking at me. "Some things aren't meant to be disturbed." I don't know why I listened. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe fear, or maybe it was the look Marcus gave me as he walked into the room, like he was staring at prey that had just exposed its throat. Before I returned the notebook, I tore out a page. The one with the drawing of me. No eyes, no legs. I hid it in the waistband of my pants, like a talisman. The next morning, Ron's dad announced we were leaving the island early due to family matters. No one asked for details. Marcus sat in the back seat between Ron and me. He didn't say a word the entire ride, but I could feel his eyes. That gaze sliding across the back of my neck from the left every now and then. We dropped Marcus off first. As he stepped out of the car, I swear he turned back and smiled at me. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile someone gives when they forgive you for something that hasn't happened yet. I never saw Marcus again. Not at school. Not anywhere. I told my parents everything. Showed them the page I'd kept. The police were called. They went to Marcus's house, but it was empty. His family had moved out the night before. No one knew where they had gone. The whole thing faded away like thick fog. No one brought it up again. But I didn't forget. I couldn't. 3 weeks ago, I moved into a new apartment. One morning, there was an envelope in the mailbox. No name, no return address. Inside was the old fountain pen, its cap broken, but still leaking dark ink, and a small sheet of paper folded into quarters. I opened it. Just one line written in pencil. "I haven't forgotten, and I'm not done. I don't know where he is, but every night before bed, I still check every drawer, and I burn the page I once held on to." That spring break, I didn't want to go to the beach. I didn't want to dance among drunk strangers or have EDM pounding inside my skull. I just wanted to get away from everything, quietly, alone. And then I found the place, a weathered cabin deep in the mountain woods near Asheville, North Carolina. Tucked among tall pines and melting early-season snow, it was nearly an hour's drive from the nearest town. Suspiciously cheap, but beautiful, like something out of a travel magazine. Oakwood floors, an outdoor hot tub, a stone fireplace, and even an old-school record player with vinyls from Nat King Cole and Billie Holiday. I sent the link to my girlfriend, Emily, and she agreed instantly. Jules and Cade, our best friend couple, said yes after a single phone call. 4 of us, 1 cabin, wine, and no cell service? Perfect, Emily said, grinning like she'd just stepped into a dream. We arrived in the late afternoon, as the forest bathed in a sunset red like thinned blood. The wind rustled through the trees, producing a low, continuous whisper, like voices in a different language. The cabin smelled like damp wood. The floor creaked with every step. But it was warm. Safe. At least, at first. We opened wine, lit the fireplace, and played board games. Jules burst out laughing every time Emily lost, while Cade stayed unusually quiet, frequently staring out the window. His gaze was long, as if searching for something that wasn't there. I didn't think much of it at the time. I didn't pay attention to the fact that the cabin had no curtains. The forest was dark, very dark, and that this cabin felt like a glowing box, surrounded by hundreds of eyes that had never once closed. The second night felt more comfortable. We had an early dinner, reheated pasta and buttered toast. Jules had brought a cheap bottle of wine that somehow tasted sweet when chilled. Cade seemed more at ease, laughing along with Emily as they played music on the record player. When Unforgettable came on, I remember thinking, we're really living a perfect little moment. Then we headed out to the hot tub. It was in a screened enclosure behind the cabin, right up against the forest. There was no ceiling, just a patchwork glass roof, so we soaked in hot water while gazing up at a sky full of stars. The contrast of freezing air on our faces and warm water on our skin had everyone giddy. Emily laughed. Jules told old stories, and Cade slipped back into silence. We were playing Never Have I Ever when a blinding light flashed into the enclosure. It wasn't moonlight, not a flashlight. It was white, sharp, like lightning, but it lasted for nearly 5 seconds. Long enough for me to see every tiny hole in the mesh screen and every speck of dust floating in the air. Then it vanished. No one said anything for several seconds. Emily whispered, "Did someone just take a picture of us?" I stood up, pulled on my shirt, and opened the door to the porch. Jules turned off the music. Cade followed me. I pointed the flashlight toward the woods. Nothing. Just thick darkness, black as velvet. Then, click. A small sound came from the left, like a metal latch snapping. Then another click, from the right. Then one more, behind us. 3 directions, 3 sounds. No repetition, no rush. Just deliberate, like someone or something was circling, one slow step at a time, but without footsteps. Cade grabbed my hand. "Nathan, get back inside. Something's flanking us." I yanked the door open and signaled everyone to get back into the cabin. Emily was shaking. Jules nearly slipped as she hurried across the porch. We shut the door, locked all 3 bolts, stacked chairs against it. Cade checked the windows. I grabbed the big kitchen knife. Emily cried quietly. Jules sat down, hands wrapped around her head. And then, in the stillness, a whistle from the forest. Not playful, not melodic, just one long, low note. And an echo. We sat in silence in the living room. The four of us huddled around a small flashlight Jewel had found in the kitchen drawer. The fireplace had gone out, and I didn't want to turn on the main lights. I was afraid I'd see something staring back. The cabin was no longer a refuge. It felt like a glowing box, floating in a sea of darkness. The whistling continued from the woods, sometimes near, sometimes far. Sometimes it came from the left, then just seconds later, from the opposite side, as if someone, or several of them, were circling the house, in a pattern, or worse, playing with us. "They know we're scared," Cade whispered, still gripping the large kitchen knife. "They're waiting." I didn't ask what they were waiting for. I didn't want to know. Suddenly, 3 knocks on the front door, not rushed, not panicked, solid, controlled. Emily screamed. Jules clamped a hand over her mouth, whispering desperate pleas for silence. Cade edged toward the door, knife trembling in his hand. I stood behind him, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Get out!" I yelled through the door. "I have a gun! Leave now!" And the knocking stopped immediately. No one spoke for about 30 seconds. Everything went silent. Even the forest seemed to be listening. Cade turned to me, eyes wide. "Why the hell would you say you have a gun?" I didn't answer. I just felt someone had understood me. And then the glass shattered. One of the dining room windows exploded inward. Something heavy is smashing through. Glass sprayed across the wooden floor. Emily screamed. Jules collapsed into a chair, clutching her chest. I ran over to look. A large rock, about the size of 2 hands, sat among the broken shards. Wrapped around it was a piece of paper, tied with a thin, hair-like strand of rope. I unrolled it. Just 4 words, scribbled in jagged handwriting that looked like it had been written by a trembling or deranged hand. "Leave this place." No threats, no curses, no name, no signature, just a command, like a sentence passed down from somewhere behind the darkness. We stayed in that cabin for another hour. No one spoke. No more footsteps. No more whistling. No more light. Only fear. And the chilling certainty that whoever was out there was still waiting. We left the house that very night. Cade drove, his hands still trembling. Emily sat in the back seat, gripping my wrist like she was afraid that if she let go, something would pull her away. Jules didn't say a word, just stared out the window with unfocused eyes. None of us slept. None of us spoke. We drove through the dark for 2 hours until we saw the lights of town again. The police arrived shortly after. They reached the cabin around dawn, checked the house, the surrounding woods, the footprints, and the shattered windows. But they found nothing. No trace of an intruder. No security cameras. No evidence that anyone had been there except us. And the rock. The rock still sat on the floor. The note was still intact, dry, as if it had never touched snow or the dampness of night. After the initial report, the youngest officer asked me a question. "Are you sure no one in your group pulled a prank?" I looked him straight in the eye. "If one of us did, then why didn't we bring weapons? Why leave behind our stuff, the deposit, our luggage?" He didn't answer, just scribbled more notes and nodded. That afternoon, I called the property owner, Mr. Merrick Hale, an old man with a slow southern drawl. Each word was released like it had to be coaxed out of a foggy memory. When I told him everything and asked, "Do you know what happened out there?" he was silent for a few seconds. Then he said, "Those woods, they're old, son. There are things out there older than people. They don't like to be seen." I asked again, quieter this time, "Have you ever seen them?" Another pause. Then, very softly, "I learned not to look out the windows after 8 o'clock. The trip was over, but something strange lingered. A week later, I opened the camera roll on my phone to look back at the group photos from the house. There was one picture, the four of us in the hot tub, laughing, the music still playing. And behind the mesh screen, far into the woods, barely visible, almost blurred, there was a tall, thin figure, standing perfectly still between two trees. It wasn't blurry, it wasn't a shadow, it couldn't be mistaken. It was watching, and I'm certain it still is. My family isn't like other families. We don't gather for Thanksgiving to eat roast turkey, and we don't huddle around a Christmas tree singing Silent Night. We have our own tradition, a ritual that outsiders might laugh at if they heard about it. But if you've ever stood in the woods of Red Pine Hollow on a December night so cold it burns your lungs, you wouldn't be laughing. We call it Hunt Night. I'm Elias Madden, and this year I turned 18. That means I'm finally old enough to take part in the game for the first time. A coming-of-age ritual? Maybe. A way for the men in my family to prove that the predator's instinct still runs in our blood? Not wrong. But deeper than that, there was something I hadn't yet found words for. A strange silence that pressed on the air the moment the game began. The rules are simple. All men in the family, 18 and older, are given a custom military-grade laser rifle. When the clock strikes 10 p.m., everyone scatters into the forest. No lights, no maps. If you get shot, you're dead. You head back and sit by the fire in the backyard of the cabin. The last one not shot by sunrise is the winner. No alliances, no mercy. On the outside, it's a game. But on the inside, it's instinct. Our family cabin sits deep in the Vermont woods, where snow falls thick like powdered chalk and bites like old memories. Out there, phones don't get a signal, the internet doesn't exist, and the only lights come from the fireplace, or someone's eyes in the dark. That night, standing on the porch with a cold weapon in my hands, I looked up at the star-streaked sky and felt a tightness in my chest. Not because I feared being shot by someone I loved, but because I sensed that tonight, we weren't the only hunters in these woods. When the whistle blew, a sharp, metallic wail from Grandpa's old silver whistle, older than the very cabin we stayed in, everyone began to spread out into the woods. No one said a word. No one looked at each other. We simply moved, silently, like a ritual carved into our blood. Every step was firm, deliberate, as if each man carried the vague sense that this might be the last game he'd ever play. I chose the northeast path, not because of strategy, but instinct. Something, not quite a voice, but close, whispered inside my head, "Go this way." The snow was thick, silent. Every step sank down to my ankles, and the only sound was the sharp sniff of frozen breath. I moved along a shallow hillside where the trees grew dense, and no other footprints were visible. Then I stopped. There was a footprint in the snow, large, just 10 paces ahead. Not mine, not from anyone in the family. I knew the shape of everyone's boots. This print was too long, the foot too wide and distorted, like it had been crushed from the inside. I bent down. There were no returning prints, just a single trail going deeper into the forest. I didn't want to follow it, but my feet moved anyway. One step, then another. I raised my laser rifle and gave the flashlight a quick test flash. A narrow beam shot out, then died, just enough to see ahead, and I saw it. A tall figure standing behind a birch tree, unmoving, no light, no weapon. Its head tilted slightly, like it was listening to me breathe. I flicked the light again. The shadow was still there, but now 2 steps closer. I backed away, slipped in the snow, fell. By the time I scrambled back to my feet, it was gone. No sound, no new footprints. The snow remained untouched. Suddenly, The radio on my belt crackled to life. A burst of static pierced my ears, followed by a single blood-curdling scream. Unmistakably, Uncle Seth's voice. No one else could scream like that, just once. Then silence. I called out, "Uncle Seth? Can you hear me? Were you hit?" No reply. I turned and ran, back up the slope. Snow clawed at my face. My hands were numb. But I ran. Not because I feared losing the game, but because I knew something was following me, and it didn't leave footprints. I ran until my chest ached like someone was squeezing each heartbeat in their palm, until the lights from the cabin pierced through the tree trunks, black as the forest's spine. I stopped to breathe, back pressed against an old pine tree, palms gripping the rifle so hard that blood welled beneath my nails. Everything around me was eerily silent. No wind, no snowfall, no footsteps, only a sound, so faint it was nearly meaningless, dripping into my head like water falling onto rusted metal. I wasn't sure if I was really hearing it or just imagining, but that sound, it didn't feel human. It was like something I'd heard in some forgotten place, like moans echoing from a basement, like a child's whimpering in an abandoned house. Then, in the dark ahead, a laser light flickered. Someone was nearby. I jumped up, aiming my rifle, heart pounding like a war drum. The laser was pointed straight at me. I didn't have time to dodge. My sensor beeped. Beep, a sharp signal. I was dead in the game. Dead. Just a game, right? But the strange part was, the laser didn't turn off. It kept shining directly onto my chest. No blinking. No movement. "Come on," I muttered. "Cut it out. Caleb? Uncle?" No response. I stepped closer. The beam still shone, but no one was holding the rifle. It stood upright in the snow as if someone had placed it there, or as if it had grown from the ground itself. I stood still, staring at the gun. Behind the tree on the other side, a footprint, large, twisted, like the foot had been broken inward. And then I heard breathing. Not mine. It wasn't coming from in front of me or behind me. It was inside my head. I spun around, flashing the light in every direction. Nothing. But every time the beam passed over the trees, I felt something had just moved. Just barely dodged the light, like the forest was playing hide and seek. When I swept the light to the left, I saw them. Two figures standing side by side in the dark, nearly 2 meters tall. No flashlights, no motion. Faces pale as snow, but no eyes. I froze. The flashlight trembled in my hand. One of them raised a hand. Not fast, not sudden, just deliberate, and pointed directly at me. And then I heard it. For the first time, a voice, real and cold, echoing between layers of snow like frozen steel. "You're next." I don't remember how I started running, only that with every step I took, something else moved alongside me, slithering through the snow like a breath swelling beneath the ground. I sprinted toward the cabin like a lone survivor escaping an avalanche. My breath came out in thick clouds, lungs stabbing with every inhale. Snow clung to my eyelashes, and behind me, something was still following, silent, but close. There were no footsteps, but I knew. The cabin appeared in the faint glow of the porch light. I screamed. The door burst open, and Uncle Caleb rushed out, shotgun in hand. He didn't say a word, just raised the gun and fired 3 rounds into the sky. The blasts echoed like funeral drums. I collapsed on the steps, my vision blurred, but I still saw it. A tall shadow standing still at the forest's edge, almost invisible against the falling snow, but just clear enough for me to see. It was watching. No eyes, but it was watching. Everyone rushed out. My mother screamed when she saw me, bloody and panicked. They dragged me inside while Uncle Caleb remained at the door, gun aimed at where it had stood. But when he shined the flashlight, there was nothing. Only a line of enormous footprints, deep and steady, leading out of the woods. No return trail. The next morning, I woke up to pale gray sunlight and the noisy laughter of my family in the kitchen. No one mentioned what happened the night before. I asked, "Where's Uncle Seth?" Every head turned toward me, as if I'd just spoken the name of someone who never existed. No one remembered that he had joined Hunt Night. No one remembered the scream on the radio. Silently, I stepped outside the cabin, glancing back one last time. And there, on the snow-covered ground, it was a massive snowman. It stood motionless, facing the forest, holding a laser rifle, the same one Uncle Seth had taken with him. And beneath the glittering snow, a scrap of red sweater, stained with dark blood, just barely poking out. The same pattern he had worn when he left the cabin. Hunt night was over, but the winner never came back. I've always believed that the worst nightmares don't start with screaming or blood. They begin with the little things. A message that arrives at just the right time. An invitation you shouldn't have accepted. Back then, I was living the kind of life many people dream of. A small, quiet apartment in the suburbs. 2 cats named Jasper and Ivy, and Delilah, the girl with shoulder-length blonde hair, seductive eyes, and something ancient behind them, as if she had lived many lives before this one. We lived quietly, had our routines, work, cook, fall asleep holding each other to the sound of rain tapping on the tin roof. Nothing extraordinary, but I was happy. And I believed she was too. I rarely talked to Delilah about my college years, where I had been nothing more than a quiet shadow drifting in a noisy crowd. I didn't belong to any group, went to no parties, and was never the center of anyone's story. I had only 2 friends. Lucas, the guy who laughed too easily and wrote terrible indie songs, and Damien, always drunk, but oddly reliable. The 3 of us were misfits, hovering on the outskirts of campus life, piecing together our own little world from cheap beer and sleepless nights in the dorms. Then, one September afternoon, Damien texted, "I met a girl named Celine. She invited us to a party tomorrow night, about 45 minutes away. Not some frat thing, it's classy." Lucas was excited. Damien begged. And me, the idiot, I said yes. What I didn't know then was that some invitations don't just lead to a party, they open a door, and once you walk through it, you're never the same person again. The road leading to that house felt longer than I remembered. Night had fallen thick and heavy, and the twisted silhouettes of trees on both sides looked like old arms reaching out, trying to pull back the car we were in. Damien was driving, eyes locked on the GPS. Lucas rolled down the window to smoke. I sat in the back, fingers tapping lightly on my knee as a creeping unease began to spread, like a chill running down my spine. And then we saw it. The house appeared at the end of a slope, 3 stories tall, covered in dead ivy, its windows tall and narrow like half-shut eyes. The lights inside glowed stark white, not the warm hue of yellow bulbs, but a cold, sterile brightness, like fluorescent lights in a morgue. Something about it felt wrong, but no one said a word. We got out of the car. From inside, music floated out, vague and distant. It wasn't EDM or college party music. It was strange, drawn out, and fluid, like someone was playing string instruments underwater. No laughter, no clinking of glasses, only footsteps, soft and even, as if the people inside weren't quite touching the floor. The door was already open. A man in a black suit stood by the entrance. He said nothing, just gave a faint nod, his smile never reaching his eyes. He didn't ask for names, didn't check invitations, didn't care who we were. Inside, the room was dead silent. Dozens of people stood, sat, and moved, but all of them were beautiful in an unnatural way. Pale skin, lips red like wine, eyes glassy, as if coated in crystal. They were dressed like something out of a 19th century ball. Tailcoats, floor-length silk gowns, lace gloves. No one spoke loudly. Everything moved with a strange softness, like we had stepped into a dream, or a dream turning into a nightmare. We walked in, looking like three lost kids who had stumbled into the ballroom of nobles long dead. Damien nudged me, whispering, "Look, free wine." And before I could stop him, he had already taken a glass of deep red wine from a girl nearby. She smiled, thin lips, teeth white like porcelain. I looked around. No beer, no snacks, no hazy lights, only that red wine, that invisible music, and those strange eyes from guests who were waiting. Lucas muttered, "I thought this was a college party, not a ghost wedding." Damien laughed out loud, but it rang through the room like a misplaced note. Too loud, too human, too alive in a place meant for the dead. Heads turned. 1, 2, then 10. All of them looking at us, not angry, not curious, just hungry. I started feeling dizzy after the first glass of wine, not from the alcohol, but from something else. Something smooth, cold, and creeping in, like the smell of rotting wood. Damien and Lucas were each already clinging to a girl. Names were whispered, Lilith, Mara, and Nyx, as if they had stepped out of some ancient myth. But their eyes held nothing mythical. They were empty, strangely beautiful, but hollow. I was talking to Lilith, or at least trying to, when I saw it. A thin blue line, no wider than thread, running along the vein in her neck, just below her left ear, like someone had drawn it with a fine tip marker, then covered it with artificial skin. But this wasn't ink. It was breathing. It pulsed faintly every time she tilted her head. I tried to ask, but my mouth was so dry my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. A cold shiver crawled down my spine. The music still echoed, not from any visible source. It seemed to come from the walls themselves, and from beneath the floor, like a moan stretched across centuries. I looked for the bathroom, using it as an excuse to get away from Lilith. But the ground floor had only one hallway, leading to a small door. I stepped through and bumped straight into a man in a wrinkled white shirt and linen trousers. He didn't move, didn't apologize, just stood there, nearly 2 meters tall, skin pale like wax, and on his neck, the same blue mark. He stared at me, then smiled. Not the polite kind of smile, but the kind someone gives when they already know what's about to happen. "Who invited you here?" he asked, voice deep, drawing out each word like a slow taste. "Celine," I replied, voice trembling slightly. The smile vanished. "Celine doesn't invite anyone," he whispered, his eyes flicking suddenly toward the living room. "She has already been used." My stomach twisted into knots. He stepped back, never breaking eye contact, as if weighing me. "Are you the main course, or just a side dish?" I turned and walked away. But what I saw next made the blood drain from my face. In the center of the room, I looked more closely. On some of the guests' necks were blue marks, on others, red, all in the same place, same length, same depth, as if they were tags, categorical marks, classifying them before they were chosen. I rushed to find Lucas and Damien, and my heart nearly stopped. When I saw it, both of them already had red marks on their necks. Lucas and Damien on the second floor, leaning against the wooden railing, each with a girl draped on their arm. The marks on their necks glowed red, not the red of wine, not the red of anger, but that kind of red, like blood dried on skin. A thin streak, running just beneath the earlobe, exactly where I'd seen the blue marks earlier. But now it had spread, as if something inside them was beginning to take hold. I grabbed Lucas by the wrist and yanked hard. "We have to leave, now." He gave me a faint smirk, like I had just told a bad joke. "Leave? I'm in the middle of an interesting conversation. Jealous, are we? No one wanted to talk to you?" I turned to Damien. He just shook his head, eyes drooping as if he'd smoked something far too strong. "She told me to wait in the last room down the hall," he muttered. "Just for some fun, Ethan." "No," I snapped. "Don't you see it? Look at your neck. This isn't fun. This is—" Before I could finish, a man passed by the hallway, tall, wearing a black velvet suit. His eyes were completely black, with no whites, and on his neck, a red slash, deeper, longer, as if the ritual had already been completed. He looked at me, then at Lucas, then Damien, then kept walking, said nothing. But that look, it was heavier than a death sentence. I didn't wait. I grabbed both of them and dragged them toward the staircase. They resisted at first, sluggish, then suddenly snapped awake when I shouted, "Don't you remember? Celine, the reason we came here. She's already been used. We're next." That's when Lucas touched his own neck, for the first time, and his face went pale. We ran down the stairs like three kids fleeing a bad dream. Everyone in the living room turned. No one stopped us. No one spoke. But every eye followed, watching us like prey running the wrong way. As we burst through the iron gate, I heard a whisper behind us. I don't know who said it, but the words chilled my spine. "The mark is still fresh." There are things that disappear, and you barely notice them. A pen, a receipt, a second sock. And then there are things that vanish in a way that makes your skin go cold, not because of what they are, but because of how they disappear. My name is Caleb, an architecture student at Purdue. I live alone in an old-style apartment on the edge of town. No girlfriend, no pets, just me, and the creaky radiator that pops and ticks every night like it's whispering to demons in the basement. I left my backpack in the lecture hall, on the chair, to be precise, for 7 minutes. I'd just run to the bathroom. When I came back, it was gone. No one saw anything. No one heard anything. The security guard gave me that fake sympathetic look. "Maybe another student grabbed it by mistake," they said. I nodded, but I knew the truth. No one mistakenly takes an old beat-up bag filled with scribbled notebooks, an empty wallet, and a dying laptop, unless they knew what was really in it. The keys. I never carry my keys separately. Instead, I clip them onto a soft tag with my apartment address. Just in case I lose them, someone might return them. A dumb habit. And now, someone, a stranger, holds the keys to the place where I sleep. At first, I was just angry, then worried, and then came a feeling I didn't dare name. Like someone was standing outside my door every night, resting a fingertip on the lock, and waiting. I changed my passwords, canceled my cards, reported the loss to campus security. I told myself, it's just petty theft. But deep down, something kept whispering, it's not what was taken that should scare you. It's what it's leading to. It started with a piece of paper, not some elegant handwritten letter or colorful sticky note, just a plain paper coaster, the kind people use to keep coffee rings off their desks, folded in half. with one scribbled line in shaky black ink. "I see you." No signature, no clue. Nothing but that sharp, crawling sensation, like someone had just exhaled against my ear and I hadn't even realized they were that close. I held the note for a long time, standing at the front door of my apartment, right where it had been slid through the thin gap between the wood and the floor. It was midday, cold, but the sunlight was blinding. No one in the hallway, no footsteps running away, just silence. And me. I tried to brush it off. Some prank from a neighbor, a drunk student, someone with the wrong address. But then the second note arrived, 3 days later. "You don't remember me, but I remember you." This time I couldn't reassure myself anymore. I changed my email password, reset the Wi-Fi, installed a secondary lock on the front door. I called my landlord, an elderly woman in her 70s living out of state. She told me to stay calm. It's a very safe building. Not a single break-in since 1998. She emphasized 1998. That didn't help. I started noticing little things. Things are slightly off. The coffee mug I left on the kitchen counter, I found it on the windowsill in the morning. My backup notebook in my replacement bag, open to a page in the middle, even though I hadn't gotten that far. And for the first time in my life, I began to smell someone's presence. Not body odor, not cologne, but the scent of dampness, of mildew, of someone who slept too long in a cold room. The smell of someone who has been here, even though I lived alone. A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. Just one line. "You lock your door well, Caleb." I didn't know what to do, except wait. And the waiting wasn't to solve anything. It was to let him act. I taped over the door cracks, wedged a chair under the knob every night, left the lights on like a child afraid of the dark. But deep down, in the coldest part of me, I knew the truth. He didn't need to break in anymore. He already had the key. At first, I thought it was just the wood creaking. Old buildings do that, expanding and contracting with temperature, or maybe it was just the wind. That's what I told myself the first night I heard the footsteps, directly above my ceiling. The problem was, I lived on the top floor. At first, it was just a single faint creak. Then it became rhythmic. Step, step, pause, drag. Like someone was slowly dragging their feet from one end of the ceiling to the other. At exactly 2:47 a.m. every night. I tried going up to the rooftop during the day. The door was locked. The padlock was rusted, like it hadn't been touched in years. I asked my landlord. She said, "Oh, that door can't be opened from outside, sweetheart. The stairs are inside, and no one has them." I didn't tell her that I heard someone up there. Every single night. I bought a small camera and set it up in my living room, aimed at the front door. I didn't expect much. I just needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. And then, after 2 nights of nothing, on the third night, I reviewed the footage and saw the kitchen light flicker off. No one in frame. But the light, which I knew I had turned off before going to bed, switched on at 2:46 a.m., 1 minute before the footsteps began. I started sleeping less. The circles under my eyes deepened. My body felt heavier, more exhausted. But my mind, sharpened like a hunted animal, always listening for that final pounce. And then came the night. The night that ensured I would never be the same again. I was lying in bed, eyes shut, but my ears stretched tight like wire. 2:47 a.m. No sound, no footsteps. Then, very softly, the sound of metal brushing against wood, like a key sliding into a lock. I held my breath. My hand clutched the kitchen knife I had hidden under my pillow. The door didn't open, but I heard footsteps, this time inside the apartment. The floorboards in the living room creaked. then the kitchen. Then they stopped. At my bedroom door. I didn't dare open my eyes, didn't dare move. My heart felt like it would explode. No knock, no whisper, just presence, like the air had thickened, like the darkness had poured into the room. And then it left, as quietly as it came. The footsteps retreated back to the kitchen. A chair scraped gently. Then, silence. The next morning, I stepped into the living room. Nothing was out of place, except for one thing. On the dining table sat a ceramic mug, my mug, filled with cold coffee, placed neatly like someone had just finished using it. I didn't touch it. I just stared at it for a long, long time and asked myself, if he's been here, how can I be sure he ever left? I left the apartment on a Saturday morning, carrying only a small suitcase. The rest, books, clothes, even the ceramic mug on the table, I left behind. Not because I missed them, but because I wasn't sure they belonged to me anymore. The new place was downtown, in a modern building with 3 layers of door locks and hallway cameras. Here, there were voices, there were cars, there was life, but I couldn't sleep. I still lay awake at 2:47 a.m., eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. I didn't hear the footsteps, but I could feel them. A week after I moved out, I received an email from the same account I had used on the laptop that was stolen. I reported the account and deactivated it through the university. There was no message, just one attachment. I hesitated before opening it. Part of me screamed, "Don't!" But my hand still clicked. It was a photo of me, sleeping, in the new apartment, with the pale blue blanket and the bedside lamp, the one I had just changed the bulb in the night before. The angle was from above, as if from the ceiling. I haven't slept since that night. I added more locks, bought a new knife, unplugged my laptop camera. But I know, deep down, the way you know winter comes early in Indiana, he doesn't need a door. He doesn't need a key. Because what he's after isn't where I live. It's me. Some things feel over the moment you hit block, but that's just the surface. A thin coat of paint over something still burning underground. My name is Rachel Morin, final year psychology major at Midland University, a small campus tucked into the quiet farmlands of Iowa, where winter comes early, and silence is so familiar it becomes a kind of noise. I used to date Eric Dawes, a fourth-year economics student, soft-spoken, kind-faced. Our relationship began like something out of a cozy movie, laptop movie nights, burnt popcorn, and hugs full of soft, sweet promises. But as time went on, Eric changed. Not with shouting, not with anger, just by being there, all the time, too much. I began to feel suffocated, like every corner of me was being lit up by a flashlight I hadn't agreed to. When I told him I wanted to break up, he didn't cry, he didn't plead. He just said, "I understand," and vanished from campus like morning mist. I thought, that's it, done. I blocked him on everything, deleted his number, wiped our texts, treated myself to a long hot shower and an old playlist. But then, 2 days later, I started hearing sounds. At first, soft footsteps, like the barely there thud of a shoe sole brushing against concrete. They came from the balcony behind my room, a balcony with no access, just a railing, and the wind. Then came the soft, dragging squeak, like someone trailing a fingertip across the window pane. I shut the curtains tight, slept with headphones on, told myself to forget it. But I knew, deep inside my chest, where instinct lives, that someone was still out there. Not knocking, Not calling, just standing there and waiting. That Sunday night, I stayed up until morning finishing our group presentation video. The project made up 30% of our final grade, and I was the team leader, which meant if anything went wrong, my name would be the first one called. I remember clearly, I exported the video, named the file, and sent it out at exactly 11:38 p.m. with a message addressed to the professor and my group mates. I even checked it twice. Everything neat. No errors. I fell asleep with the kind of relief that feels like slamming shut a heavy door. But the next morning, that very door burst open and swallowed me whole. Our professor played the video during class. At first, just a black screen. Then, an image appeared. But not of our group, not our project. Instead, it was a grainy, discolored clip with cold CCTV tones, like it had been recorded in a crypt. A person wearing a mask sat alone in a dark room, only a red blinking light behind them. They stared into the camera, said nothing for the first 10 seconds. Then, they began to mumble. No, not mumble. Whisper, loud enough for everyone to hear, but so quiet it made your skin go cold. She thinks she's so clever. She thinks blocking someone makes them disappear. But some things aren't people. I sat frozen in my seat. The entire class turned to look at me. A few nervous giggles broke out, maybe from tension, or because they didn't yet understand what they were watching. But I understood. I heard his voice. A voice I thought I'd never heard before, and yet somehow knew. The voice of someone who knew my name, who knew what university I went to, who knew I had taken a shower at exactly 10:41 p.m. the night before. The professor shut off the video. His face had gone pale. He asked me to stay after class. I couldn't stand. My legs felt hollow. My hands were shaking like electricity was running through them. I logged into my school email, opened my sent folder. There were 2 emails. One at 11:38 p.m., the one I remembered, and another at 2:14 a.m., both from my account. Same sender, me. Except I'd been asleep by 2 a.m., and someone, or something, had used my name to send a message to the entire class, not as a warning, but as a beginning. After what happened in class, I changed every password, email, social media, even my banking app. I bought antivirus software, installed a VPN, and deleted Snapchat, the app where I used to spend hours taking selfies in the perfect lighting. I also took down all my curtains, not because I wanted someone to see in, but because I needed to see out, just in case someone was already watching. But only 3 days later, I received a friend request from an unfamiliar account. No profile picture, no name. I didn't accept it. But minutes later, a second account appeared. Then a third. All 3 sent the same photo. I thought I was prepared, but I wasn't. It was me, standing in front of the bathroom sink, wet hair, white robe. The photo was taken from above and to the left. I don't have a camera in there. I don't live with anyone. I never took that photo. I felt my stomach hollow out. The second photo, I was asleep. The window is slightly open. Warm yellow light was pooling on the floor. The photo had been taken from my doorway, at exactly the place no one should be standing at 3 a.m. I locked down all my accounts, but they kept multiplying. A new one every day. And each sent only one thing. Moments no one should be able to witness, unless they were there. I went to the police. The detective asked, "Do you suspect anyone?" I didn't say Eric's name, but they found him anyway. He had once posted my personal info on a revenge forum, photos, full name, address, and even my class schedule. he denied hacking, and I believed him. Not because I thought he was innocent, but because whatever this was, it didn't feel human. It didn't just want to hurt me, it wanted to be close. And that night, when I turned off the lights and lay down to sleep, I didn't hear footsteps, no breath, except my own and the pounding of my heart. But I knew, with a kind of instinct deeper than the senses, that it was already in the room, not in the closet, not under the bed, but in that feeling, the one that keeps you from turning around. I moved the following week, told no one, posted nothing, said nothing to friends. I rented a new apartment on the far side of town under a different name, used a prepaid phone, no registration, no trace. I did everything a person on the run might do, even though no one was officially chasing me. The first 3 weeks were calm, so calm. I started to doubt it had ever happened. No strange accounts, no messages, no knocks at midnight. I started sleeping again, started to believe that maybe, just maybe, it had stopped. Then one rainy afternoon, I found a package at my door, no return name, small, light, wrapped in coarse brown paper, placed neatly in front of my apartment. I didn't want to open it, but I couldn't not open it. Inside was an old round mirror, the kind people used to hang in old bathroom walls. Its edges were scratched, the glass spotted with dry mold, like it had hung for years in a house no one lived in. I picked it up, turned the face toward myself, and then I saw the writing, faint, like it had been traced by a bare finger on long-faded condensation. You don't need to look. I'm watching enough for both of us. I dropped the mirror. It didn't break. It just rolled onto the floor, face down. That night, I removed every mirror from the apartment. The one in the bathroom, the one in my purse, even the front-facing camera on my phone. But sometimes, when the lights are off, I still feel it. That slow, steady gaze, gentle, patient, not angry, not in a hurry. It doesn't need to touch me, because it already knows me, long enough, deep enough, and close enough. You've just heard 21 stories, from the suspicious neighbor to the shadow in the dark, from crowded bars to empty roads at 3 a.m. And you realize real fear doesn't come from the supernatural. It comes from people showing up right when you least expect and in the places you once thought were safest. If this video gave you chills, hit like so the algorithm can spread this fear a little further. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because every week we bring you new stories. And next time, it might hit a little too close to home. And leave a comment below. Have you ever met someone who gave you chills, even though they did nothing at all? Which moment from these 21 stories made your skin crawl the most? We read every single comment, especially the ones posted at 2:47 a.m. See you in the next video, if you're still brave enough to hit play.